somebody, come on down. Bring your paintbrush, we're painting the town. There's some sweetness going round. Dreams do come true in podcast leans.
So I want to, because I think people might be confused. It was a heady opening. What I did there, this movie is set in New Orleans.
Yeah, Nolans.
Right. Now I'm pronouncing it in the very non-traditional way, the overly formal way, New Orleans instead of Nolans, because in order to execute and once again, a very subtle sort of nuanced joke that I want to open the episode with, I had to imply that there is a place called Podcast Leans.
Of course.
And that, in fact, that place is where dreams do come true.
They sure do.
In podcast leans.
Here's the thing that really hit me hard watching this movie. Because I was digging back into, like, while I was watching it, I was going through all the, like, Wikipedia citations. A thing I often do when we do this show is I'll start on the Wikipedia, and then I'll start looking at the linked articles from the time the movie came out, and then I'll use that as a rabbit hole to look into other things. Because I'm always trying to remember, like, how were things received? How were they anticipated? What was the discourse like at the time, rather than what's it like now? And there was so much hand-wringing, obviously, about the representation in this movie, and Disney would announce something, and then they get blowback, and then they go, never mind, we're changing it. There was all this stuff, but they were trying so hard to be like, this is important. We understand the importance of it. It's our first Black princess. It's an African-American movie. It's set in New Orleans. We're being respectful of the culture. Musker and Clements going like, trust me, we take this seriously. We went on vacation there for 10 days. We did our work. We took it very seriously.
They did their classic 2-week vacation where we went to Africa, we went to China, we went to New Orleans. Don't worry, guys. We soaked it in.
Their defense every time is, trust me, we didn't take this lightly. We spent 10 to 14 days there. It never surpasses 2 weeks. It's always 10 at the minimum, 14 at the most. But for all of that, you look at this movie and they're like, we really wanted to be respectful to the culture of New Orleans. And that's why we made sure to throw that authenticity into the movie by putting in the voice cast, the 3 most important New Orleans residents, Dr. John, Emerald Lagasse, and John Goodman. There's some connective tissue of the 3 New Orleans residents you choose to put in the film as voice actors. What is it? There's some Dr. John Goodman, Emerald Lagasse. Well, no, I think that pretty much covers the spectrum.
I know, I did not think about it that way, but it's a fair point.
It hit me with the Emerald Lagasse, because I would not have recognized the voice. He plays an alligator very briefly, but I was just like,
sure, that's
weird that Emerald's a voice actor in this, because he's not an actor. Famously, conclusively, as one season of Emerald on NBC taught us.
I was about to say, the man put his time in on network TV. Can't forget about that.
He tried. He tried, and we all collectively said, no thank you.
That's all right, Emerald. Thank you, but no thank you.
I mean, you could say they went bam to this movie.
Right. They went bam, despite the fact that the public had said to Emerald, maybe take it down a notch. But that's the one where I was like, why is Emerald in this? Oh, because they wanted real New Orleans authenticity, and it stopped at 2 white guys named John and a chef.
You're right. I can't deny anything you just said.
You asked me right before we started recording, do I like this movie? And I said, let's save it for when we start recording. So, hello, everybody. This is Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their career and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. Sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they bounce
in podcast leans.
And this is a mini-series on the films of Musker and Clements, charting the Disney Renaissance, the rise, the fall, the rise, the fall. This is a sort of an aborted rise before the real rise takes, post-fall, post-rise.
It's a mild rise, but
it's a mild rise. It's a half rise. It's called the Puddle Mercast. We are talking about their final 2D animated film, Princess and the Frog, which I do not really like.
That's interesting. Okay. All right. All right.
I saw it in theaters. I was pretty nonplussed with it. I wouldn't say I dislike it, but there are elements I find mildly charming, and there are a lot of things I find frustrating in it, and it ends up just sort of evening out to a net neutral.
Because I think my take, and I don't know what our guest thinks either, to be honest, is that this film is excellent. But, while I acknowledge some of the broader, almost outside of the film issues with the film, if that makes sense. Like, as a cultural statement, I don't know if this film is totally successful, but I like this movie a lot. I've watched it many times.
Many times. Wow. Okay.
That's hard. It's hard. I think I feel like the movie is good, but then when you think about it, it's bad.
Yes. When I think about like, oh, is this what they should have done? I'm like, probably not. No. But when I'm like, I kind of want to watch my little frog buddies flirt. And then like, I really like the villain, and there's lots of things about this movie I enjoy. I've seen it several times. Yeah. But right, was the entire enterprise well mounted? I don't know.
Our guest today has done an entire podcast episode on this movie before, on his own podcast, Black Man Can't Jump in Hollywood, which I listened to at the time and then realized right before we started recording I should have re-listened to in anticipation of this so as to not make you repeat every point, because we want to try to establish new things. But do you not even remember what you said that episode?
I have no idea what I said. I don't I don't know if I liked it then or what.
You had Caroline Martin on. I remember listening to the episode at the time, but I certainly relate to that very hard. I now have the experience. I don't know if you've had this increase. Our guest today from the Black Man Can't Jump in Hollywood podcast, an astronomy club, all that, Black Mirror, James III is back on the show.
Woo! So glad to be back. This is
so glad to have you
and
back.
To talk about this movie in particular will be fun.
I gave you a pretty long list, and you said Princess and the Frog's the one I'd want to do. And I'd remember that you did an episode on it, but I didn't remember where you really came down on it. I was going to say, I don't know if you have this, James. And in general, it's just like, our podcast started about the same time. I think you guys have been doing your show for about 5 or 6 years, the same with us. Mm-hmm. It's just at this point, you've put a lot of thoughts down on microphone. It's hard to keep track of them. And also so many episodes are like, this is my very, very strongly formed opinion on this movie on the day I recorded it. Those opinions can like shift over time, or at least intensity they can shift. But also you just make so many bits and you like share so many opinions and you share so many anecdotes and all this sort of stuff. And then now at the point where we're almost like a year into doing these things like remotely in this isolated way, in this like nebulous time where everything's soup, I just no longer remember anything I've said on the show.
I don't know what I've talked about. I don't know how I feel about any movie anymore. Like, I don't know.
This is why I would listen to the podcast that we put out to just remind myself, like, oh, okay, I say, helps me not repeat myself later. But now there's the dual problem of one, I'm so behind on my podcast listening because of the pandemic. I don't commute, and so I don't listen to as many podcasts. So I'm behind on our podcast. And two, some of these episodes are 5 years old. I don't fucking remember what I said about Vanilla Sky. I don't know. Let's do another Vanilla Sky episode. That movie's kind of grown on me.
I'm in the exact same position where it's like, it's not even like a self-satisfied, like, oh, I want to listen back to this podcast I did. But it was like, or let's listen back, like in a like Dafara, like let me have a slice after I close up the pizza shop every night to make sure I still know how to make pizza,
I still got it. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's all right. That was pretty good.
Yeah, it's still good. I don't need to retire yet. But A, yes, I'm so behind on podcasts. B, we record so much because we like try to stay ahead. So like the idea of throwing on 3 hours of myself talking after it's like all I do is listen to myself fucking talk. I sit alone in silence in an apartment and I record 5 episodes a week. I never want to hear myself on microphone ever again.
It's not 5. It's 3.
But yeah, yeah. I thought it'd been long enough since you wanted to do this movie, and it'd been long enough since you had done on Black Can't Jump in Hollywood. I was curious to hear your thoughts on it, especially within this context.
I mean, I definitely on this rewatch feel like some of the stuff was similar. I was like, oh yeah, I remember loving how much it just felt like a 2D Disney animated movie. The way it looks and the way they talk and the way, like, just everything, it just had that energy. And they really, especially the beginning of the movie, they're like, hey, remember what this feels like? And they caress you with it and it feels good. And you're like, yeah, my nostalgia for this is very prevalent.
It's been, I mean, if you're counting Tarzan, that's a musical, right? They sing in that, right? I barely remember it, but it's been 10 years. It's a long awaited thing.
Right. That's the weird thing. It's been like 10 years since there was like a classical sort of like Disney fable musical in 2D, but it's only been 5 years since they've released a 2D film. I mean, you have like Tarzan's the last of like that era, and then you have Atlantis, Treasure Planet, Lilo and Stitch, Brother Bear, Home on the Range, which are all sort of weird, Emperor's New Groove, which are all sort of weird new experiments and expanding that end up sort of like falling off a cliff at the end of that run. And the timeline is so bizarre. I was refamiliarizing myself with it. It's like they stop production on everything that wasn't too far along after Treasure Planet bombs. They go like Brother Bear and Home on the Range, you get to finish. You're the last two through the door. Everything else, just stop it in its place, right? Rapunzel was supposed to happen. The Ice Princess was supposed to happen, or the Snow Queen or whatever. Which then becomes Frozen. Like, they just put the brakes on everything. We're frontlining Chicken Little and Meet the Robinsons and Bolt, right? We're going CGI. The old Disney movie style is done.
Right.
That happens in 2004. After Home on the Range, they officially announced, like, we're closing down the studios. Musker and Clements are let go. All the old guard guys are let go. Then in 2005, Disney buys Pixar, places Lotsahug and Lasseter in charge of animation, and he immediately is like, we're reopening hand-drawn. We're hiring everyone back. It was a span of a year, and then this is announced in 2006.
It was a logical decision to, like, the decision, I mean, the saddest period in Disney history is that Chicken Little Meet the Robinsons Bolt. That's just... That's not, no one was happy with that. I know you sort of stick up for Meet the Robinsons.
I kind of like Meet the Robinsons, yeah.
I remember when I first saw Chicken Little, I like laughed and thought it was really fun. And then I went back and watched it and I was like, oh, like, it was like, no, it's not what I remembered it to be.
It's so bizarre, that movie. It's such a weird period. I mean, I do think like part of the issue is, yes, I have this same, like, it activates the same sort of like buttons for me just watching a movie be this unabashedly a Disney princess musical after it felt like they were taking so many half measures and being so embarrassed of that for so long. But there's also a degree in which it feels like it is doing all of that stuff a little bit too self-consciously for me. Like it's like a cover band of itself where the movie keeps on announcing like, you love this, you miss this, right? And then the next year after this is Tangled, which I think is the best of the modern Disney animated movies, the best of the last like 15 years. And Tangled is obviously CGI, but I think does a better job of like representing the energy of those movies and also putting something more modern into it. And then obviously after that, Frozen happens and just the chance of them ever making a movie this classical again kind of goes out the window, it feels like.
Sure.
Once they nail the Frozen Tangled balance where it's like, oh, you're doing a Disney princess musical, but it's modern and it's CGI. The CGI is styled to look more like Disney drawings. It's not realistic, and you have the weird clothing shapes and whatever. Then I just feel like that's the exact formula that they now want to work on.
I don't like that nonsense. I do like Tangled. I prefer this film to Tangled, though.
Greatly prefer Tangled.
And I don't like how Tangled looks, which is part of the problem. But I also don't like Tangled is about Rapunzel. I mean, like that's my big problem with Tangled. Like, it's just the fundamental problem, which is like I can't with girls in dresses in castles anymore. As much as I like that, there is a lot of fun stuff that Tangled does.
I really liked Tangled, but I avoided Frozen for a long time. I didn't. Frozen 2 was coming out, and I hadn't seen the first Frozen. But I had seen that Olaf movie that they put in front of Coco.
We all saw that.
But I hadn't seen Frozen, so I had no understanding of why I should hate this.
Were you like, oh, this snowman guy, he's fun?
And so I was like, this is fucking incredible. I was like, I loved it. I thought it was hilarious.
Wow. The only person.
But I get that it was like, they were like, let's tack this movie onto Coco in case this movie bombs and people don't want to, or people don't want to see a bunch of brown people talking for 90 minutes. Let's put, but me just being like, all right, this is Disney, baby. Let's see what's going on.
It's so funny that was their calculation. It was so clear that was their exact calculation of okay, here we have a Mexican Disney movie coming out after Trump was elected. Is this not going to work? Let's give them 25 minutes of Frozen beforehand. And people reacted so negatively, they pulled the Frozen short.
Yeah.
That's astonishing that the response was that vicious that they were like, no more Frozen on my screen, please.
I remember it being 40 minutes long. Is that wrong? I remember it being just interminably, insanely long. Maybe it was
it was really long.
40 minutes if you're including the trailer pre-roll, right? It's going to take you.
I think it's 25 because it was supposed to be a TV special. And it's also just, you're seeing a lot of trailers and your brain is conditioned to, the shorts that play before these movies are 4 minutes long.
Yeah. Not a, has a full, several act story.
Multiple songs? This has act breaks?
I left the theater because I knew I'd been warned. This thing is so I left. I went and got snacks. I don't know. I probably walked around. I made some conversation. I just was I have to stall as long as possible because I actually want to enjoy Coco.
I saw Coco, I think 3 times in theaters, and the first time I caught the fucking Olaf thing, and the second 2 times when I went to see it with people, I was like, good news. You don't even have to show up to the theater until 20 minutes after the advertised showtime.
Right.
What time's the movie at? 4:50? I'll meet you at 5:15.
But wait, did this have an animated short in front of it, Griff?
I think it
Princess
did.
And the Frog? It must have, right? They usually did that.
I don't know. I mean, they start doing that more with the Disney, because that's another Lasseter thing. The Disney animated films should also have shorts in front of them. But I'm trying to think of what it would have been. I'm not sure if there was one.
Yeah, there may not have been one. I'm not seeing any mention of one. Griffin, I'm assuming you said you saw this in theaters. You were whelmed, it sounds like.
I was whelmed.
Were you pumped for it? Were you like, I'm so happy Disney's back to the Princess 2D thing? Or were you kind of like, well, let's see what this is?
I mean, a combination. I think I was not very excited for the movie itself. The materials I would see for the movie were not very exciting to me, but I was very excited philosophically for them doing this.
Right.
I was excited for every single thing about this movie on paper. And then every time I saw a trailer, I was like, this just doesn't feel totally right to me. And I a lot of the Disney movies were often marketed on the most simplistic level. We talked about this, but Frozen and Tangled, it was largely because of the underperformance of this movie. And the movie still made $100 million domestic and $250 worldwide. But the bar for Disney is obviously so goddamn high that they viewed this as an underperformance. Tangled was already almost done. And then, the Snow Queen became Frozen and they punted that over to CGI and rethought the whole thing. But both of those movies were supposed to be called Rapunzel and the Snow Queen. And then they were like, no. Cannot have any princess shit in the title. Come up with an action word, right? Put that in there and then make the trailers as much about the funny animal sidekicks as possible. They were actively trying to hide the fact that they were musicals and that they were princess movies.
Exactly. Tangled, you had the poster where you got Flynn with the cast iron pan and that the horse has a sword. Same with Frozen, obviously being Olaf heavy. They tried to emphasize comedy over majesty in the advertising. Yeah, and then of course post Frozen, they're like, back to majesty. Disney is the distillation of magic. Like, there where we have it again.
But now they can do it again. Like, by the time you get to Moana, which we'll talk about next week, they're just like, this is a Disney princess musical. We're proud of it. Here's our lead character. She is the hero of the movie. Everyone enjoy, and people are amped. It's a big hit. Everyone loves it.
And we've brought in a major composer. We're spending the money. You know, like, it's everything. It's not just like one or two, you know, because I feel like by the end of the Disney boom, the Disney Renaissance, I mean, I guess they start to go for, because Phil Collins, they start to go for pop singers, like, you know, Elton John, I guess, kind of breaks their brain. So they're like, right, Phil Collins, Sting, let's get in these guys, which was a mistake. But I guess I get what they were doing with this. This one's, of course, Randy Newman, the great Randy Newman.
Yeah, but I mean, that Randy Newman was one of my issues with this movie. Like, and it sucks too, because I love Randy Newman.
One of my favorite musical artists of all time, both as a solo artist and his film work.
I have no problem with Randy Newman. Like, you know, you got a friend in me. All right, cool.
Great.
Buddy. That's great.
You do indeed have a friend in me, Randy.
And the songs in this movie are fun and you know, they're fun, and you like you go through the story and but like, I just want a real Nolans jazz musician to like do all of this music.
It's a strange decision.
It's a lot of what I struggle with on this movie is that it just feels like they're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out about a lot of stuff, and also overthinking a lot of the calculations, right? Because this movie was pretty much just sold on 2 planes. Look at the progress we're making culturally. Here is your first African-American princess, and also we're getting back to our roots. We're doing the thing that Disney's known for. We're not embarrassed anymore. But then the Randy Newman element is so weird, because it's like, well, but like, are people still cynical about those songs? If we bring Menken back and make it super classical, is that too much? Randy Newman does Pixar movies, which are a little more modern and a little more edgy. Also, he's from Louisiana, so we can have him do the music. But also, this isn't really the person you should have writing these songs.
It's the 2000s thing of the slightly lip servicey. I mean, not just Randy Newman, but like I'm sure you read it, but the early, like, the character was called Maddie. What was she was a chambermaid. Like, it felt like they made these. The movie was called Frog Princess, right? It wasn't called The Princess and the Frog, right?
That title was changed because people thought it was offensive to French people.
Well, there are French speakers, sort of, I suppose, down in the bayou. I don't know, but yes, no, it is funny that people were like, "Hey, you trying to come after the French? Is that what you're doing here?"
It just speaks to the fact that every time they like stepped out on stage, straightened their bow tie and went, "We are proud to announce," people just booed them.
Right.
They kept on saying, like, the next element is Randy Newman, and people were like, "What?"
I mean, just the fact that they brought on Oprah Winfrey as a quote unquote technical consultant. What does that mean? Like, what was that phone call? Like, I know Oprah Winfrey is a black woman from the South, but it's like, are they just like, can we just like bounce this story off? You see what you think? Like, what the weird Disney lip service of the era. I mean, and it's a story of so many of the movies we've covered. Like, on this miniseries, Aladdin is what I'm thinking of. I guess the other ones were not Musker Clements. You think of Mulan, you think of Pocahontas, like, where it's like, oh, sure, one step forward. You want to do something different. You want to have a different kind of protagonist. Okay. And then they're like, anyway, so like, I don't know what the dragon should be called. What, Mushu? Maybe like there's just no further. And of course the classic 2-week vacation to China or Africa or where, like, what, the Lion King is another example, right? Where they're like, yeah, we got it. We know what's going on. Like, this movie's going to be highly culturally attuned.
But I even think like the Randy Newman of it all is just like, his sensibility isn't totally right for a straight sort of more earnest Disney princess musical, right? Like, Yeah, he obviously is beloved for writing like the Pixar songs and stuff, but the Pixar movies notably don't have characters singing those songs. They're not story songs. That's not really what he's good at. And his one Broadway musical he did was his biggest calamity of his entire career. He did a bizarre Faust musical that people hated, that I think is interesting, but it's like, this is not his strong suit, is doing character story songs.
No, I have to put my foot down. Randy Newman is a great storyteller, songwriter. Like, he had just written a massive anthem about Louisiana 1927, that was all about Katrina, like, that had like dominated the airwaves over there. Like, and he's famous for his storytelling and his songwriting, not in the Pixar movies, but in his albums and his music. Randy Newman.
I didn't have a problem story-wise with like I really liked like Are You Ready? I really liked Almost I'm Almost There.
Almost There. That's the one song I think fully
So
rules.
good.
I think that's
Yeah.
a great number. I love it visually. I think it's a great song. That's the one where it feels like they hit the bullseye for me.
I didn't know this was going to be a contentious at our each other's throats episode, but this score is great. I love all the music. This is what I'm saying. It's like, I like the music. I like the movie. I agree that I don't think they should have hired Randy Newman. Like, in a broader, like, this is Disney making its first musical with a black protagonist. You know what I mean? Like, even though I enjoy the outcome.
Not knowing Newman's New Orleans roots, like I just wanted a black composer. Like,
Yeah,
I just
yes.
wanted a black composer,
Yeah.
and like,
Absolutely.
and I wanted there, and I think I wanted. Watching it now was like it's hard because it's me. I think it's me overthinking this and not me actually just trying to watch this kid's Disney movie. But like I wanted everything to sort of feel edgier. Like I just mentioned really liking Are You Ready? But I don't like how much Are You Ready sounds like. It sounds like it's like it's hearkening back to early Disney instead of being like this song about like voodoo creatures pulling you into hell or whatever.
Right. It's technically called Friends on the Other Side is the name of that song. Yes.
Yeah.
I just think that they can't totally decide which things they want to be step forwards and which things they want to be throwbacks to their history. And if I can split a hair here, and I am allowed the opportunity to refine my point, David, I'm a huge Randy Newman fan. I fucking know
He's the
that Randy
best.
Newman is good at story songs, but let's make it clear, on his albums, each song is one isolated story. He writes songs from the perspective of a character, and most of those songs are satirical. What I'm talking about is Faust. He does not do like concept albums. Faust is one of his only works where he's building one solid narrative around the culmination of songs building to a story. Right? That is not what he's asked to do. The only other musical film I think he's written was Cats Don't Dance, where the songs are fun.
Right.
I'm not saying he can't do this, but it is not what he does primarily.
I think he can do it, as evidenced by The Princess and the Frog, which I think is pretty good.
How many Randy Newman tattoos do you have, David?
I gotta say, I fucking love Randy Newman. I do. Like, I love the guy.
But this is the thing. I might be a bigger Randy Newman fan than you are. I'm worried that this is coming off like I'm a Randy Newman hater when I'm a Randy Newman obsessive.
We've all established that we love Randy Newman.
We love Randy Newman.
One of the saddest things was when the New York Film Critics Circle gave him a special award. I guess it was last year. For like, I guess it was Marriage Story was the peg, but for like whatever, like a lifetime of film music.
You say it was for Marriage Story. I'm pretty sure it was for I Won't Let You Throw Yourself Away, the greatest song ever written for a movie, Toy Story 4, Forky's Ballad.
It's true. He had also done Toy Story 4. So we were very excited because it's like, okay, then Randy Newman will come to the dinner. And then Randy Newman is not a young man anymore. And he could not travel at whatever that month. He was there was something up, so he couldn't come, which was sad. I would have liked to have seen Randy Newman. It was still nice to award Randy Newman, obviously. Just a little thought about Randy Newman. We belong together. Won an Oscar for that one.
Oh, and I loved. Hold on, there's one more that I really loved. It's like probably a couple of the Ray songs were really fun.
Yeah, the Ray songs are great. This movie has got a fucking firefly that wants to turn into a star. It's got all kinds of cool shit going on.
No, I just want to make this very clear because I feel like, as you said, this is already feeling like it's shaping up to be a contentious episode. And it's not that I have like a bunch of really strong anti-takes on this movie. The problem is, watching it just now, I felt the same way that I felt seeing it in theaters, both times really wanting to love it. Like, as I said, I was not super excited by the marketing materials, but I loved that they were doing this. And, the Tangled and Frozen marketing campaigns I mentioned were after this, but there was a history of Disney trying to misrepresent things in order to try to make them seem broader. And I was like, maybe I'm going to sit down, I'm going to feel that classic Disney Renaissance magic. And this time I haven't seen this movie in 11 years. I've been watching Musker Clements for the last month or two. I'm really in that headspace. Maybe I'm going to rediscover it as a masterpiece. And both times I just feel kind of bored by this movie. I find this movie weirdly kind of unengaging. There are things in it that I respect where I go like, I like that craft. This is cool. There are things in it where I go like, that conceptually feels off. That seems a little like wrong-headed. But it just levels out to me just being a little bit unengaged. On the other hand, I will say a thing that I find inherently engaging is my comforter. I find a tremendous amount of comfort in my comforter, and I engage with it for approximately 16 hours a day. Spent a lot of time in bed coming up on the 1 year of this pandemic. This week marks the 1 year. Wow, what a fun benchmark to hit. But listen, that's why the comforter is more important than ever. And I ask you, the listener, how's your comfort looking these days? I'm no longer talking to James and David and Ben. I'm sorry, guys, just hold on for one moment. I want to engage with our listener and say, how's your comforter actually looking these days? Does it look how you feel? Maybe a little lumpy, maybe a little deflated, maybe a little flat, maybe a little wrinkled, maybe a little stinky. Maybe it looks stinky. I know that's how I feel these days. I don't necessarily smell bad, but I look stinky. Maybe your comforter no longer has the same fluff to it. It's time for a refresh with Brooklinen. What a twist, right? It was our old friends at Brooklinen and one of our favorite sponsors here on the show. I love Brooklinen products. I talked about it a lot. I've purchased so much Brooklinen product with my own American dollars, but they're also kind enough that once a year they'll often offer to send us a sample or something. Maybe they did it once. Maybe it literally only happened once. But they re-upped this year and said, do you want to try this new comforter? And I feel like one of the recent times I did an ad read, David, and I ask you to not weigh in here, to just silently nod along. But I said to you that I was doing research and people were saying that the Brooklinen down alternative comforter for hypoallergenic people got a rating as good as their down comforter, that they were like the first. From bedding blogs that I was looking up, they said it was the first down alternative that was indistinguishable from the real thing. And I was saying, man, it sounds good. If you're hypoallergenic, you got that option. Sounds good. Meanwhile, I got my down comforter from Brooklinen, and it's also good. Well, folks, I got to eat some crow here because I went back and looked at my receipt. And in fact, I got the down alternative. That's how undistinguishable this thing is from the real thing. I had been sleeping on it, in it, under it, around it, adjacent to it for a week at that point. I'd forgotten that I got the fake thing because the fake thing's as good as the real thing with Brooklinen. The thing they do is they create beautiful, high quality bedding and home essentials. They work directly with manufacturers to give you a fair price, no middlemen, no markups, and their comforters come in lightweight. That's one option for hot sleepers, all season for versatile sleepers, and ultra warm for cool sleepers. I don't want to make that sound like a value judgment. I'm not saying you're cooler if you want an ultra warm. I'm just saying you trend cold. The point is they have options to suit every type of sleeper and lifestyle. And, there's even a weighted comforter option for stress release, something I know nothing about. There's also a variety of materials, as I said, the eco-friendly recycled down alternative. So it's not only hypoallergenic, but it's also hypoallergenic. What did I say? It is hypoallergenic. It's angelic. It's hypoangelic, this comforter, and it's also got some good morals behind it. And, just throw out there, they pair perfectly with sheets, pillows, and duvet covers that you can also buy from Brooklinen. There's a reason they have over 75,000 five-star reviews and counting. And I assume it's just because of our ad reads for them. So, folks, here's the point. Here's the call to action, okay? I want all of you, and sure, James, Ben, David, this extends to you as well, but I ask you to please continue holding your tongues for a moment. I want all of you to treat yourself to ultimate comfort with Brooklinen's Comforter Collection. You see what the ad copy wizards did there? Go to brooklinen.com, use promo code BLANKCHECK to get $25 off with a minimum purchase of $100. That's BROOKLINEN.com. And enter promo code BLANKCHECK, no space, for $25 off with a minimum purchase of $100. That's brooklyn.com, promo code BLANKCHECK. Now let's go back to talking about The Princess and the Frog.
Here's my thing that I felt this time that I had not felt before, and I have no idea if you guys will have felt the same thought, but like, this is the first time I watched this movie after having seen Soul, and the fact that 11 years later, Pixar finally had a movie with a black lead where the black lead is in the body of an animal for a lot of the movie, which is a complaint people had about this movie and a complaint people had about Soul. I don't know, for whatever, like, it just was more lodged in my brain, or even more lodged in my brain this time watching this movie. I don't think it's like it's a thing that makes story sense. I don't think it's like this absolutely bananas thing in either movie, but you do it's hard not to sort of be like, what is up with that? Right, to sort of have the eyebrow raised moment. Did this occur? I don't know.
James, at the time we're recording this, you guys at Black Man Can't Jump in Hollywood just released your Soul episode yesterday, which I have not listened to yet. Will have been out for a couple months by the time this episode comes out. Don't want to make you relitigate that, but it is. I was thinking about the exact same things while watching this movie in the light of Soul. What's your basic stance on Soul?
I liked Soul, but had a problem with especially because the story, what's actually happening story-wise of him being in the body of the cat, they could have just written something else. It could have just been something else.
It felt like they needed antics, right? Like, it felt like there was this sort of need for, like, okay, we need something that, kids will respond to and it'll be madcap and fun. That seemed to be, it didn't have the same thematic thrust.
But isn't it as much an issue if 22 ends up accidentally in the cat? Like, isn't it still a problem?
Right. The Soul has the double swap, right? That's the other issue with Soul specifically, right?
With both of these movies, right? Watching both of them on Disney Plus within a span of a month, right? And comparing the two of them a lot in my mind, as all of us are right now, by the nature of these podcast episodes we have to do. In both cases, I just hit like, couldn't they just do this instead? And for Soul, is there any reason Soul didn't do All of Me? Like, didn't do the Steve Martin, Lily Tomlin, where they're both stuck in the one body? And the complication is that he...
Wow, I would have loved that.
Right, that hit me, and I was just like, that accomplishes everything they're trying to do with having 22 walk a day in his shoes, but still give Joel control of his body and his agency and all that sort of shit. And the same thing with this movie, where I'm just like, it could have worked if she's still a human and Naveen is a frog and she's trying to help him because he promises that he'll give her the money for the restaurant. Like, this movie could still pretty much work as well, if not better, just on a story level, right? Like, putting aside the larger sort of like perception issues of this movie. But there's this weird thing where they had optioned this book called The Frog Princess that was like a YA early 2000s book that was the take on, it's like a riff on The Frog Prince. The girl kisses the frog, but rather than the frog becoming a prince, she turns into a frog too. I think that was maybe optioned by Pixar originally. I was trying to track the trail of this, but it was its own independent project. Then Lasseter comes on, says, we're going back to hand-drawn, and his sort of proposal was like, maybe 1 out of every 3 movies will be hand-drawn. But we want to be in the hand-drawn business. We're still doing CGI, but we want to be doing our classic princess musicals. We want to be doing this. And then at some point, like, all the things gel where they're like, we're probably overdue to do a Black princess movie. We want to do a hand-drawn musical. The options exist within the Disney Pixar family for this book, and The Princess and the Frog or The Frog Prince or any of those variations of the stories are like one of the sort of classical fairy tales that haven't been touched by Disney yet. So all those things get mushed together. And the problem comes from, as you said, David, it doesn't feel malicious or strategic, but it's like, okay, so you bought the rights to this book that's kind of a clever twist of, oh no, what if she turns into a frog as well? And then you decide representation matters. We want to make a movie in New Orleans about Southern cooking and jazz music and have an African-American lead character for the first time. Let's combine the two and have her be a frog for 90% of the running time.
Yeah. And no one said that it would be that no one had an issue, even when they asked Oprah to be a consultant.
It's Oprah, wait.
Do you have an issue with the full, 2/3 of this movie where we don't see the Black woman?
Do you think Oprah was like, wait, do you think she should be a frog for that long? And they were like, Oprah, look, we realize this, but it's too late. We're halfway through drawing this thing and we can't turn that boat around. We're just trying to fix things on the side.
That's honestly what it feels. I mean, there's that story Dan Harmon tells about being brought in to do rewrites on Kung Fu Panda, and they show him the entire movie on storyboards.
Right. And they're like, we can't change it.
You can only change 30% of it. And he said, what did that mean? And you said, you can change 30% of the storyboard cards entirely. You could take 30% of them down, replace them with something new, or you could modify 30% of what is in each storyboard, singular.
Just stuff on the sideline. Isn't that Patton Oswalt? No, I can't remember.
I think both of them have done bits about this.
It's possibly right.
That kills me to even think about. And they did something similarly with Soul. Like the movie was almost done before they brought in Kim Powers, who co-wrote and co-directed it. And it's it's still great. It's great that they do stuff like this. Yes, get people, please get people involved that can provide a different perspective. Please do that. But now, can you just get them a little bit earlier? Can you put them in at the top?
Maybe they're the people who should be formulating these movies in the first place, rather than the people you bring in as a council at the end.
This is right. What's happening here instead is Lester is I want to take, you guys took these movies off life support. I'm trying to just bring them back in any way. Clements and Musker, obviously, the old legends who, started the Renaissance. Let's bring them in. And then you have Rob Edwards, who worked with them on Treasure Planet on their last movie, co-writing with them. So, but yes, I mean, every world in cinema seems so cloistered. Animation seems so cloistered, right? The fact that Pixar just now is putting out shorts like Bow, right? Where it's oh, look, a person of color worked on this one, where you're
they did their first queer short ever on Disney Plus.
Right.
They're starting to write. And now the Bow director's making her own movie. But yes, it's taken so fucking long. James, I'm curious, because it sounds like you've read a lot of the same, crafting of Soul interviews and pieces, because I after watching it was I really want to try to figure out the gestation of this movie, how this came to this shape, and I just keep on sort of digging into it to try to figure out some of the story decisions, because Soul is a movie, and Moana is like this for me too, where I'm I love this, I find this very watchable. If I engage with it, I find a lot of things problematic in it, but the movie as a piece I find very functional and effective, and then I have these large kind of issues with them. This movie for me, it does not grab me as much to distract me from the issues that I find. But I found some Kemp Powers interview recently where he directly said, and I think part of the weird soup of Soul is that it's a doctor created thing. Obviously, he's the one bringing it to life. It originally was supposed to be the Joe Gardner character was supposed to be an animator, and then he was an actor. They landed on music late. Then it became jazz because it felt that's the form that's maybe the easiest to represent, this sort of spiritual ether of what we're trying to do, this sort of jazzing that the whole movie ends up being about. And then Kemp is brought on after they've realized, this character should be black. If the movie's about a jazz musician in New York City,
They came to that last. They had jazz musician before. They were like, oh,
Yeah.
should he be a black guy?
right? So that's the chain of things. They were like, actors too self-involved, animation is too insular because that's our experience. He should be an artist. At a certain point, he was a scientist. Like they were like, but it's better if it's art because
It's just like your life's passion, I
Right,
guess, right?
right.
And then
So
they were
it's-
like, it should be a jazz musician. Is Dr. John still alive?
that was the
Is he
thing, right?
available?
So then the last step is, I guess this guy shouldn't be white. Then they bring Kemp Powers on, but that also coincides with Lasseter being ousted and Pete Docter being placed in charge of Pixar. And so I think Kemp Powers has a lot more authorship over that movie than a lot of co-directors or co-writers brought on late in these films, because I think
Yeah.
Pete Docter started having a full-time job, and it feels like Kemp Powers maybe kind of was running quarterback on the last year of that movie. But I read an interview with him where he was addressing the complaint of people being like, why is fucking Spies in Disguise, he's a pigeon the whole time? Why is Princess and the Frog a frog the whole time? Why is this...
Oh my God, Spies in Disguise. Fully forgot.
Right. Like, why are there 3 of these, right? And he said, like, well, you have to understand, it all kind of happened organically. All this story development was done before I came on board. This and that, piecemeal. When I came on board, I immediately sort of like pulled the fire alarm saying like, we have to be very careful about what we're doing here. The optics of not having him in his own body aren't great. And he was the one who was like, I want him to be in the cat's body. That was a Kemp thing. So that way he could be around the whole movie. Because this thing that he revealed in this interview was 22 was supposed to be the lead of the movie until like a year ago. The entire film was designed from 22's perspective. Right. That's like a crazy,
so much.
a crazy thing. It feels like the movie was designed to open in the great beyond, focus on 22, and you don't even really deal with Joe until she ends up in that body.
Yeah. So, but that's interesting though, too. Even thinking about like, then it's like, it becomes even more confusing if like the movie was originally supposed to be about 22. Then like why folk? I have so many more questions.
I agree.
There's a lot of questions.
Like why focus so much on Joe? Like what? Like why not? Why not just start? Because one of my issues with Soul was like I would have liked to have been in the land of the dead more, or in the land of the great before, and like spent more time with that. Like I feel like Pixar has so much fun with their new worlds and stuff, but they were kind of like, they kind of did the like bullet points of like, this is the land, this is the great before. All right, we back on Earth, you know?
Which I agree with 100%. And that only makes sense when you realize that's what the movie was supposed to be. And then Kemp Powers came in and is like, you're playing with some volatile elements here.
Right.
You need to completely reconfigure what you have on the board. You have not thought about the larger takeaway points being made by this movie.
Right.
I also think, I don't know, like Doctor had literally made his Feelings Blobs movie. It feels weird that he was like, but what if it's about souls? And I'm like, is that different from Feelings? Like, how is you putting all your credit? This is going to take you years to make. Like, it feels too close. Like, especially since, there's thematic threads running through all the movies he's made. But like Monsters, Inc. to Up to Inside Out, it's not like it's like, oh, you're just repeating yourself. You know what I mean? Like, so it's weird. I don't know. I'd like to see Soul again, but I thought it was, I thought it was good. Yeah.
I like it a lot. I've seen it twice now, but I have these fundamental issues with it. When Soul got announced, I remember talking with you about it, David, and it was like, oh, the first time they were announcing a couple original movies. It had been so many sequels in a row, and then they announced like Onward and Soul, whatever it was, 3 or 4 years ago, that those movies are eventually coming, and they're the animated originals at the end of this sequel pipeline. And you were like, that's encouraging that they're announcing new movies, right? And I, the biggest Pixar fan in the world, remember saying to you, like, it feels a little bit like self-parody for Pete Docter to make a movie about souls called Soul.
It's the Steve Jobsiness, their whole Silicon Valley vibe where, it's like he comes out, he's in his half zip and he's like, we just got to thinking like, where does a soul come from? And everyone's just like, ooh, whoa, are you going to show us the world of souls?
But that was like almost verbatim the exact log line when the film was announced. A film that asked the question,
what is a soul?
What is a soul? Where do our personalities come from? And then Princess and the Frog is kind of like the exact opposite, where it's just like a lot of elements, right? There are a lot of elements that you can understand them getting excited about and going like, let's put them all together in this box without necessarily a larger overarching idea or vision. And it's, Musker and Clements are like the old masters at this point within the system. Lasseter hires them back, is like, we're starting up hand-drawn. If someone's going to be making a hand-drawn movie, it should be these two guys. But to your point, it's like, if this is the story you're landing on, then maybe it shouldn't be these two guys.
Whereas I agree with that. I agree. And again, I will watch Soul again in a year or two. Maybe we do Doctor one day. It's 4 movies. Like, he's one of the most prominent Pixar auteurs, right? You know, obviously. But I agree with everything being said, and I preferred Onward, which I guess is a hot take, I guess, but I like Onward a lot, and I think Onward is underrated.
I agree with that. James, this opens up a question I realize we should throw to you in general. What is your sort of general relationship to Disney movies, and especially this sort of Disney Renaissance era? We're all roughly the same age. Yeah. I feel like we've had guests on for this miniseries that are all roughly our age, and it is hard to like extricate our generation from what these movies represented at different points in time.
Yeah, I started not really. I grew up with like the Disney VHSs, so we had a ton. We had like Peter Pan and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast, and like we had like all of those movies at home, and then like Prince and the Frog, obviously I did not see until like way later, and got into Pixar, but and the Disney Pixar regime, but like there's a handful of like of like big ones that I haven't seen. Like if you would be like, have you seen this? And I'd be like, no, I'm sorry. But like Finding Nemo and Monsters Inc. are like my jam.
Yeah, the best.
I friggin' love them.
Perfect movies. I also, you were slightly more of a Nickelodeon kid, were you not? I know you were a big Nick kid.
Yeah. I was a big Nickelodeon kid. I didn't have like Disney Channel, so like I didn't like super buy into Disney. I went to Disney World though, and Land as a kid, and loved both of them. Like still like wide-eyed kid. And experienced both of those places and loved that. But
we were talking about this on some episode we recorded recently. Maybe it was our Return of Jafar episode, but that my family had Disney Channel in those early days. I mean, obviously it wasn't the beginning, but before they became basic cable, when they were still pay cable, and it was seen as like a forbidden fruit thing. And I remember being so excited when my dad was like, we have added the Disney Channel to the cable bill. And I watched it all the time, but they had so little Disney on the Disney Channel at that point in time. The Disney Channel at that point was such a weird channel because they still were like, we could make more money licensing these things out to bigger channels that more people watch.
My only memory of early Disney, because I until it was like a part of most cable packages, I never had it. But like I remember like I feel like, but even like Goof Troop was like not on Disney Channel. That was like on like Fox and stuff, right?
That was the thing. Like all those shows would be on like ABC, CBS, Fox, and then they would rerun on Disney Channel. Or like the one that had gotten canceled 2 years earlier was still in rotation on Disney Channel. Like those early 90s cartoons would still play on Disney Channel. But I think it's like 97 is when Disney Channel becomes part of a basic cable bundle. And they start doing the original movies, and Disney Channel becomes what people think of as Disney Channel.
Right. A whole generation that I missed out on. Like, because, like, if there are people 5 years younger than me who are like, oh my God, my favorite Disney Channel original movie is like, Sarah in Paris. Wait, that just sounds like the Netflix show. But you know what I mean? Like, where it's just like, you're just like, wait, what is that? I've never heard of that. And they're like, it was on Disney.
Yeah, my wife loves Brink.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Great example. Right. Like, and I'm a couple years younger than you guys. I don't know if your wife and I are the same age, but I think that's literally the difference of like Brink was like the second or third Disney Channel original movie. Like I was still in at that point, for the first couple of them. But Disney Channel now represents something entirely different. And at the time that we were growing up, Nickelodeon had such a clear brand identity. There was such a thing to get into. And it's not just their programming, but there was the whole sort of like philosophical thing of like, fuck
Yeah.
you, parents, get out of here. I'm playing with boogers.
Yes. The kids have taken over the programming.
Yes.
Yeah, slime, man. Come on.
Yeah.
I just watched a documentary about early Nickelodeon, and that literally was there. They were like, everyone sat in a room and they were like, yeah, we want to say fuck you to the parents.
Right.
And I would argue that Nickelodeon has lost that edge now. Like, they're not quite as like, fuck you parents as they used to be. But that was a great time.
They used to be Antifa. They used to be anti-parents.
Right.
But it did feel like it was organized in that kind of way. Like every commercial on Nickelodeon was like, while they're out of the room, we must plan. You can trust no adult. Put shaving cream in their slippers. Tell them to go suck a lemon. Parents fucking suck. Even just, you remember how aggro the Nickelodeon magazine commercials were? About how you just had to pester your parents to get you a Nickelodeon magazine subscription until they broke down psychologically. It was like advanced interrogation techniques.
Right. There was those commercials, right, where it's like, yeah, listen up. Here's the strategy. Here's how you like put your parents' mind in a box, basically, and then you shake it.
They're not the boss of you. You're the boss. You rule everything, kid.
Your dad is a fucking bug. You can own him. Listen to me. I am your god. I am Gak.
In the 70s, it's like kids don't exist. We have no idea what those are. We don't make programming for them. In the 80s, it's like kids buy toys. The programming should just be toys moving around, and then the kids will want to buy the toy. By the 90s, they're like, kids are basically have credit cards.
Yeah.
Like, we need to treat them as an entirely independent demographic.
And this is also, it's a political movement now. This is an ideological stance. And as, in contrast to that, Disney is just like, it feels like movies made by parents who are like, come on, trust us. I know we're parents, but the movie's going to be fun. You know?
Yeah, right. Disney was never going to be cool. It's never going to be cool. Disney is not cool. If anything, Disney is the coolest it is now in that weird, creepy way where it's become like a lifestyle for people. It's a little, much to handle. But yeah, Disney will never be cool. It's no.
They also, this is the Disney Channel shift, I think, that really takes hold in the early 2000s, where they start like engaging with teen sexuality. They start being like, we're going to make things about like kids dating each other and crushes and singing to each other. And we're going to create like teen idols, which was a thing they had sort of not done since the Mickey Mouse Club.
Lizzie McGuire sort of, she's the dawn of a new era for Disney. Yeah, because she's right. She's like, she's like a teenager. She's a young teenager, but still, right. It's whereas like in the 90s, if you wanted that, you had to be on Nickelodeon. You had to be watching Clarissa and all that stuff.
But I mean, to the point of what you were saying earlier, James, it is funny that watching it now, I get it, because now we've gone longer without a movie like this. Like now it's actually been 11 years since they've taken a stab at making this kind of film. I think the only other major hand-drawn movie they did after this was the Winnie the Pooh movie, which quietly slaps, is so fucking good.
I didn't see it, but I remember being like, every movie that I feel like when this movie came out and when Princess and the Frog came out, it was like, we haven't done this. This is gonna get you right in the fields of your memory. Like, and I didn't see it because of the fanfare. Like, it was so like, yeah, Winnie the Pooh's back, you guys. And I was like, all right.
I also have not seen it.
It's so good, but it also felt like their whole marketing campaign was, like you were saying, like, guys, this movie is so short and inconsequential. It's the kind of thing that Disney used to make. Like,
you don't even need to come.
Right.
Don't come.
It's so charming, that film, but it also is like designed to be a non-event. It's 62 minutes. It's just got 3 loosely connected episodes. Like, it's just good. It's funny. It's got good gags and shit. But it was like designed to be a minor film, whereas this movie was all about like, this is important. We need this as a culture. We have to bring this back. And it does like get to you. It is weird. I mean, the movie starts and like what you were saying at the beginning of the episode, James, you watch it and you're like, fuck, I didn't realize I missed this.
Yeah, I like there's something about the diction like the diction of the voice actors, and you're just like, that sounds. I don't hear that sound in anything else. Like I hear it in this. The way that they move, like the way that she cuts the ribbon in the beginning is like such a Disney. I'm not looking at the ribbon, but I'm cutting it. Like it's so.
It's so
just
posy.
The angles,
yeah.
Everything about everything about it just is like trying to be like, and it feels like this movie in particular is like, we should have had a black princess earlier. Like so. We're gonna make it feel as like this was actually just in the archives this whole time. Like
that's the thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way about it, is this feeling of like, we know, and we also think we should have done it earlier.
yeah.
Like that the movie is saying, honestly, I agree with you.
Yes. Yeah. When they cut to the Southern Belle as a kid,
yes,
when we first see her like fully dolled up and like all excited, and they're like, the story's about her, you know what I mean? Like they're like, wasn't this dumb that we did this for so long?
Yeah, look, see, we're making fun of it now. That's the character that feels so Disney to me. Like whatever it is, like the third shot of the entire movie. I mean, you see the like cityscape or whatever, and then when they go inside to them hearing the story, and it's Tiana and the Bafoo girl or whatever her name is, both like leaning forward on their hands, like rapt attention.
Her name is Lottie.
What's her last name?
FYI. It's LaBouffe, isn't it?
LaBouffe.
Isn't it that?
Yes.
Yeah, LaBouffe. Yes. Big Daddy LaBouffe is her daddy.
But just the way they animate these two little girls in princess dresses leaning forward, listening to a fairy tale, I was like, this is just the most Disney animation shit of all time.
Absolutely.
In a way that like hits me. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm ready for this.
I mean, Griffin, I've been looking at the best animated feature nominees post, of this last decade, and for like how many American 2D films have even been made, like period, not Disney, anywhere. Because the only one I can see is Klaus. Right?
Right. I mean, I could tell you some that haven't been nominated, but they're mostly
like what? Like seriously, like genuinely.
Things like the two SpongeBob movies. I mean, they're almost entirely TV show adaptations.
It's TV, right.
Like the My Little Pony movie. It's like shit like that. Right. It's just TV continuations. In terms of original, I don't think there are really any. Certainly going theatrical, because like Claws I love, but went to Netflix.
It did, but it was at least, that's at least a feature, right? But like, you see in these last 10 years, there's like stuff like The Illusionist, like European stuff. There's obviously Miyazaki, the Ghibli movies. Like there's things like, it's not like it's a dead medium, but it's just not coming from America, right? Obviously, and there's the great cartoon saloon stuff, right? Song of the Sea, yeah, all that stuff. Wolfwalkers this year, yeah.
No, it always feels like you expect that every year it's going to be like 2 to 3 CGI movies, maybe one stop motion film, and then one film that has to function as both the representative for overseas animation and for hand-drawn.
Right, exactly.
And otherwise, if a studio is making a big theatrically released 2D film in the States, it's almost always because that's the style of the TV show that it's based on.
Just a bit of a bummer, just in general. This is kind of the last one, and maybe it's the last one forever. Although I do feel like with Hollywood, everything new, old is new again. I'm sure someone will come along and be like, "Well, don't we miss that? Like, let's do that." Surely that will happen again at some point, right?
And it'll hit kids. Kids will be like, "I've never seen anything like this."
Yeah, right.
I've never seen this on the. It's big. It's on the big screen.
It feels like that's sort of maybe what Netflix is trying to do. I mean, Claws they did not develop. They acquired while it was in development, but it was not something birthed by them, or at least it wasn't their genesis. But that movie I think is really good and uses CGI to augment the 2D in a really interesting, smart way that gives it its own unique look. But it is fundamentally a 2D film.
That movie is like English Spanish, right? It was directed by a Spanish guy, so it's even that movie is not entirely American either. But
then they did that one this year or last year, Over the Moon, that Glenn Keane directed, who's like legendary Disney animator. That's a Chinese fable that was co-produced by them and Pearl Studios, which used to be DreamWorks China, but then DreamWorks sold it off into its own company. And that was sort of created by Netflix in-house. I mean, they developed that from the beginning. And Glenn Keane was a big hire they took away from Disney to say, you should be helping run our animation department. And it feels like they've been making a lot of announcements. They've been making a lot of big hires. There's a lot of things they haven't announced in terms of specific projects. But it feels to me like Netflix strategically is maybe trying to exploit that gap, that hole in the culture. Yeah.
It just in general also that like there's an animation. You can make more animation. It's very popular in general. Like, yeah, 3D, 2D, whatever. Right. But as we sort of said, for context, we should get into the movie itself, obviously. But right, Lasseter brings them in. Apparently, New Orleans is his favorite city. Did you know this? This is part of the.
I didn't, but it's frustratingly on brand. It just
He loves to party.
right. New Orleans is his favorite city in the same way that Hawaiian is his favorite shirt. It's like I get it. I understand what you like about this city, John.
Oprah Winfrey, of course, hired as a technical consultant. As you said, based on both the Frog Princess, the Frog Prince story, but also this like YA book from the early 2000s that I think you're right, Pixar had been working on or something.
But they don't even. I mean, they bought the rights from her. She got paid. I don't even think there's any sort of proper story credit for the movie. It's like she got paid a lot of money for them to use nothing other than the hook of the girl becomes a frog too.
Yeah, I don't know. Wikipedia lists it, but yeah, I don't remember seeing it like in the credits or anything like that. No. And it's got Anika Noni Rose. She had just done Dreamgirls. She's obviously like a big Broadway figure.
This is actually a good point. James, you were saying how different the voice acting is in this movie. This is them consciously sort of like running back the dial to what Disney was doing in the 90s of mostly cast Broadway actors.
Right, not big celebs. Yeah, I mean,
Right, cast Broadway actors, cast veteran voice actors, and maybe a couple of character actors with interesting voices, right? But it's like your leads are pretty much Broadway actors. Then you have like Jim Cummings and Kevin Michael Richardson, who are just animation vets playing the key supporting parts. And then it's like, oh, you'll sprinkle in like Keith David and John Goodman.
Right. And like Oprah is the mom.
Yeah.
Right. Keith David's a voice legend in his own right, of course.
And same with Goodman. I mean, right. A lot of the people in this movie who are also live action actors are either primarily Broadway performers or have done so much animation that it qualifies as an entire second career for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I didn't even hate like Terrence Howard being like, all smooth and whatever. Like it was like, yeah, cool. Her dad's super smooth. This is fine.
It's also good casting. Like he's got a fucking good voice. He's only going to be in the movie for 5 minutes. Like make him stick out in our minds.
Jennifer Lewis, obviously, who is another Broadway legend.
Yeah.
Who's, been in everything.
And is giving a performance.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoy it.
Oh, come on.
It's a performance.
Yeah. I looked up the cast before I started watching the movie. I started watching the movie, and then when Mama Odie came on screen, I went, who is playing this? Even though I had just looked up, I went, this can't be Jennifer Lewis. And guys, actually, if I can share a lateral thought here, much like I was astounded by the revelation that this was, in fact, Jennifer Lewis playing Mama Odie, sometimes I can't believe what is on my feet. I think I put Bombas socks on this morning, but it feels like I'm walking around on 2 clouds. Like I dipped my feet into some nimbus clouds and I'm just walking, puttering and murmuring around my apartment with Bombas's. I don't know. This is a sweaty transition. Listen, the point is that Bombas makes the most comfortable socks in the history of feet. They've literally rethought every detail of the socks we wear to make them more comfortable. Nothing figurative about the process that Bombas engaged with here. I mean, look, it says here in the copy, they want me to say that I wear them every day. And the fact is, I don't, and it's a problem in my life. I don't take good enough care of myself. David wears them every day. David only has Bombas, and he is doing much better than I am in life, in pretty much every sense. Meanwhile, I got like Bombas socks in my rotation, and like 2 days out of the week, I take some crummy low thread count pair down, and I go, ugh, it's one of these days. Because these socks, it's not just that they keep your feet cozy, there's also an ethical component to it. Okay, there's an ideological component to it, which is they give back to the most vulnerable members of our community. All the little lightning bugs out there trying to romance the stars. I'm kidding. Those aren't the most vulnerable members of our community, but they should be discussed in greater detail. Because the point is, with every pair of socks you purchase, Bombas donates a pair to someone in need. The generosity of Bombas customers has allowed them to donate over 40 million pairs of socks and counting through their nationwide network of 3,000 plus giving partners. And the impact is more powerful than ever. Because to those experiencing homelessness, these socks represent the dignity of putting on clean clothes, a small comfort that's especially important right now. Socks are one of the most requested items at shelters. And I know that from when Bombas went on Shark Tank, got a deal, and became the biggest product in Shark Tank history, which they never put in the copy, but I always feel the need to mention because it's a badge of honor. So listen, here's the deal. You give a pair when you buy a pair. It's that easy. And on top of that, you're going to get 20% off your first purchase at bombas.com/check. That's what you got to do. You got to go to bombas.com/check for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/check. The Jennifer Lewis of socks. That's what they are. They're the Jennifer Lewis of socks.
So the plot of the movie, she's not really a princess, much like many a modern Disney princess, much like Mulan, like all these characters that they, dub princesses.
Yeah.
I guess it's those two are the most egregious. They have, they're not princesses. They're regular people.
Yes.
But Tiana she's a waitress. She lives in New Orleans. Her best friend is a local rich girl, and she wants to own a business as her dad wanted to do, and he's dead. That's where we're starting, Griffin.
Yeah, I mean, I like her a lot as a character. I'm most engaged in this movie for the first, whatever it is, 15, 20 minutes.
When she's like doing the waitressing, she's like juggling all the dishes around and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is like you talk about this movie trying to get back to like, the way the Disney movies used to feel. I was thinking while watching this, it's like, the princess movies, the musicals, the fairy tales, they are usually, period pieces set in a very specific culture or a fictionalized version of a culture, working off a tale that we've all heard 1,000 times, putting some specific genre into it, right? The contemporary Disney animated films, and I know this movie is set in the early 1900s, but in the span of Disney animated films, I think anything that's in the 20th century counts as contemporary.
Certainly, yes.
The contemporary Disney animated movies are almost all the animal movies, right? Like the ones that are more modern are Lady and the Tramp and 101 Dalmatians and Rescuers. Those are the ones that take place in like a modern civilization, and they're talking animals who see the world differently because they're not really in the world of men. And this movie is weirdly, it's like, it's bizarre. You're like, oh, this is odd to hear a Randy Newman score, which feels more modern, to see Tiana existing in like a modern city, to be like trying to build up money to buy a business and not be like concerned with the decrees of the king and shit. And you're like, this feels like something new. This is them taking a step forward. And then it just slips kind of into animal movie. And I immediately, there's just a deflation for me once they become like frogs on a river.
James, what do you think? Part of it is I really like frogs. Frog is my favorite animal.
Interesting.
What? You mean to eat?
I do like to eat a frog. I will say that. Yes.
I love frogs too. I've never eaten frog, but I love frogs as well. I'm with Griffin in that it does deflate for me the second she becomes a frog too. Like, and I feel like I did this the first time I watched it, which was I always check the time to see like, oh, how long has it been? And I was deceived this time because I got so wrapped up in her being like what she was going through before she turns into a frog that I was like, wow, I didn't remember it being this long. And it's like not long. It's just it's less than 30 minutes before she turns into a frog. It's like 29:50 or something, I think, is the exact moment when she shifts into a frog. And I don't know, it just feels like it's like, what even is happening now that she's like, it's now just all she wants to do is like not be a frog so that she can, I don't know. And we're going to see them fall in love over the course of an hour. Like,
Yeah. Right. Once she's a frog, the conflict becomes, can I get back to the movie I was doing beforehand? And the problem is, as an audience, you're like, yeah, I preferred that movie too.
Here's the thing. I agree that the central metaphor of their froghood is not really clear. For him, I guess it's a little more like he needs to be humbled. He's a, jerky, rich kid, right? Like I get his part a little bit more, but she's just kind of like, I don't want to be a frog. Like, let me get out of this frog. Now, I enjoy journeying through the swamps and meeting fireflies and crocodiles and all that. Just fine. Like, I don't mind the change in milieu, but I don't like if you're thinking of the classic Disney transformation movies, right? Like Little Mermaid or even what else do we got? Come on, there's like a few words, sort of, Beauty and the Beast, right? Like, there's a huge lesson that has to be learned. I guess what does she have to figure out that
this is my single biggest problem with the movie. These are the two biggest failings for me, okay? And they become pretty fatal flaws. One, I do not at any point buy that there is a lesson that Tiana needs to learn and that she learns it. I don't think this film ever convinces me that she has a character flaw that needs to be resolved, that is somehow happens through her experience being a frog. I think she's a pretty fucking good, well-adjusted person. I like her. She's responsible. She's got good priorities.
And they shoot themselves in the foot too, because like it could be that she could like not have such a strong reliance on the fairy tales and the magic and the mysticism of that. But in the beginning, they're like, you can't just wish on a star. You have to have hard work. And she immediately takes that in and is just like, okay, I don't believe in the mythology of these stories. I'm gonna make my own way. And then she suddenly gets thrusted into one, and it's like none of the magic works still. But like she has no reason to think that it would. Like there's nothing there.
And at that point, it doesn't feel like her learning a lesson. It feels like this movie is just being cruel to her. You fucking, you knocked these fairy tales out of her brain and told her to fucking grow up and care about the real world. And the second she got her shit together, they were like, never mind, Jinx, you're in a fairy tale.
You're in a fairy tale. But that's the arc. The arc is that she needs to not just worry about, being this great success and fulfilling this dream that she's had with her father and her, right? Like, it's like, no, like you should make time for fun and for silliness and for kissing frogs and like living your life beyond your career.
And it took being a frog to do that.
Of course. That was the only way she was ever going to learn. Soul does a much better job of that exact same story idea. Oh, the guy follows his passion to the sacrifice of everything else in his life. He needs to slow down.
Yeah, but no one kisses in Soul. There's no kissing. There's no romance between cute little cartoon frogs.
That's why David likes this movie. David loves kissing.
I like this movie because it has two little frogs that need to fall in love. They're little frog guys. I like frogs.
Okay.
And I like kissing. They figure it out.
Can I throw out my second fatal flaw of this movie?
Yes.
I don't buy that Tiana has a lesson she needs to learn and that she learns it is A. And B, I don't buy that she ever falls in love with Naveen.
I don't know. He's pretty cute, though. Naveen. Prince Naveen of Maldonia. Griffin. Maldonia.
I agree, because like she, even as the movie's going on, she like when she learns that she wants to marry him and she's like, oh my, she wants to marry her. He wants to marry her.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh my God, thank goodness. You're like, what? Like,
when did that happen? When did the scene happen?
You fall in love with him? Because I didn't see it. I didn't see it at all.
And this is another staple of these types of movies, right? Where you have like the guy who's either so brutish and rude, like Shrek or Beast, or the guy who's so vain and caught up in his own stuff. And it's only through them being stuck together on an adventure together that she finally breaks through and sees the real him, right?
Right. Same with Tangled too. Stuff coming later. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Right. It's all an act. It's a defensive thing. You find out who they really are.
Zootopia, later Disney film, obviously. Right.
Although a movie that I appreciate for being aromantic, but their buddy duo is very much based on that dynamic. Yes.
Nonetheless, right? Like he's the charming rogue, she's the straight arrow. They're gonna break each other's walls down. Yada yada yada.
I agree with you, James. I had that exact same moment when she goes, "Oh, thank God, he does love me." I went, "Where did the scene go?"
Yeah.
Where she starts liking him. I guess one of those scenes was supposed to represent that, but it just doesn't feel like they really sell that to me.
Yeah. And part of the problem is the frog faces aren't super expressive, because I do feel like there's that moment when he's like, "I love how excited you are about your dream," and we get two looks from Tiana as a frog, and one of them is like, "What do you love?" and then the other one is and when he says your dream, but we know that he's like covering up, it does not read like, it doesn't read that it's something more than that. And it's because I think the frog faces are just a little too pared down, a little not as expressive as they could be. And,
I like the frog face.
James, I fully agree. We've gotten to the central conflict of this episode. We've identified it. This is a movie about kissing frogs, and David is always going to be in the tank for that. You and I are less innately drawn to frogs, James, than David is.
Here's my larger point.
Yeah.
Beyond this movie. Now, Tangled has a romance. I think the romance is the least interesting part of Tangled.
I think it
does
works.
have a romance.
It's not my favorite part, but I think it
fine.
works.
It's fine, but I don't like Flynn Rider very much.
I like him. I think he's good. It's the only Zachary Levi performance I like. Go on.
That's crazy. No, you like Shazam now. You have to admit it. You like it.
Yeah, come on. Shazam's pretty great.
Oh, I love Shazam. It is almost a testament to Shazam. I think he's doing the bare minimum to make that movie work, and everything else in the movie is firing on all cylinders.
But post Tangled and this, Disney is just resistant to romance.
Yeah.
It's and I think it's partly born out of the fact that the Disney princess story arc is very regressive, and the old narrative trope of like, you need to find your Prince Charming and at the end you're going to get married is something they wanted to leave behind.
Or he needs to find you. You need to sit around and wait for him to find you. Yeah.
And like, your reward is this, right? Like, I understand that they wanted to dispense with that. So even when they bring back the princess stories with Frozen, they consciously avoid romance. You got Anna and Kristoff mucking up a little bit, but like, the whole point of Frozen is it's about the sisters and their connection, and that's what saves the day at the end, right? And Zootopia, like you say, like, it's got that like moonlighting sitcom energy, but it's not a romance. Moana doesn't have a romance.
It's so pointedly aromantic.
Yeah, the Ralph movies lack romance. Frozen 2 finally lets Anna and Kristoff kiss, thank God. But it doesn't look like Raya and the Last Dragon's going to have a romance. Like, I don't object to this entirely. I just think that, like, give me a little, once in a while. Come on. I miss it. It's been so long since we've had kissing in Disney movies.
I mean, it's really cute that he minces a dinner for her.
Yeah.
I loved that. I thought that was really cute.
That's the closest they come to having like chemistry in frog form, I feel like, in terms of setting that up. But I still think it's missing a beat.
Yeah, because even in that scene, it's like, yeah, good. He tried to do a thing. Like, it's not that she didn't need anything from him.
No, which is the other reason I think the movie probably works better if she stays a human the whole time. Like, somehow I think the story, because the movie at the end tries to get back to this idea of like, well, my father didn't have everything he wanted, but he had everything he needed, right? She has this realization that the love in the family is the thing that matters most of all, and her father was rich in love or whatever, which it does not seem to be that woven into the rest of the film, right? But also it's like, well, she's stuck with Naveen because they're both in this shitty situation together. Whereas if it had been a little more of a Zootopia thing where it's like, look, I don't like you, but you're telling me if I can figure out how to make you human again, you'll give me the money for my restaurant. Okay, we're uneasy allies, versus they're just united because they're both fucked.
Yeah.
I think they can't have one of them be a frog and the other one not be a frog, because then she'd be falling in love with a frog as a human, and maybe Disney was just like, no, we can't do that.
Yeah, but they did Beauty and the Beast. We can do it again. I
I was going to say, yes, Yeah, and also it's just once again, it's like Naveen gets turned into a frog because he goes to fucking Facilier who tricks him, but also because he's like fucking flighty and like looking for easy life hacks and shit.
His just reward. Yes, right, exactly.
Tiana has done nothing wrong.
Well, that's fine. I think another reason I like this movie is that I am someone who often, as Griffin can attest, encourages people to set things aside in the name of romance a little bit, right? Like, oh, come on, throw caution to the wind, right? Like I'm a little bit like that, right?
Yeah, kiss.
Yeah, and just we're talking about the movie, but like as you said, right? Prince Naveen, the penniless but handsome prince, gets turned into a frog by the Shadow Man, Dr. Facilier, played by Keith David. Okay, he runs into Tiana. She's dressed like a princess for a costume party. She kisses him. Turns into a frog. Now they're both frogs. Now they got to go in the bayou and figure out their situation. And they meet, as we mentioned, Mama Odie, played by Jennifer Lewis, a 200-year-old voodoo priestess who is essentially the movie's like fairy godmother, right? She's the one. They're going to her. They're like, can you help us out of this situation?
She's the fairy godmother, but she's also like Yoda.
She's a little Yoda-y, sure, right? And that she's small and old and
wacky,
silly. And,
right.
Right, yes. And dancing around and cooking things. And yes, that's...
Plays with snakes.
She has a staff, right? Doesn't she, when she first walks out?
Yeah, she's hitting things with sticks, yeah.
And it's basically, she is me, in that these two people come to her door and they're like, we don't know what the fuck to do. We're hanging out all the time. We're making each other crazy. We want to be rid of this situation. And she's like, yeah, well, you know what you need to do, right? And they're like, yes, what we need to do is be rid of the situation and go back to doing the normal things that we were doing. And she's like, you don't get it at all. What you need to do is kiss. That's what you need to do. Yeah. And they don't get that. They'll figure it out.
It was really funny when the song ended and they ask like, did you get it? And she says like, oh, I have to raise the money. Whatever the thing is that she says. And then Ray's like, okay, we got to sing the song again. 1, 2, 3. That kind of joke gets me every time.
Every time. Every time.
Get the trombones out. Let's do it again. Like, I love that.
The one I was thinking of that's my favorite version of that joke is in Muppet Treasure Island, where they do the cabin fever number, and then it cuts down to like the barracks where the few pirates are being kept, and they were like, "What's going on up there?" And they're like, "Oh, you missed it. It was a whole musical number." And then they start telling them, like singing it again. Yes, that joke always fucking gets me when a musical number ends and the characters go like, "That was a good musical number." I still want to be singing.
So. Yeah, and this is a movie where everyone is in some kind of debt, right? Like Naveen, he has no money. His parents have kicked him out because he's such a scoundrel. Tiana is trying to raise money for her thing. Dr. Facilier literally owes like a magic debt to voodoo gods. That's why he's like, right? He's doing the thing he's doing. And like, you just gotta kiss and you're gonna figure it out together. Like, strength in numbers, people. Like this, it's a beautiful thing. Princess and the Frog.
I always knew you liked this movie more than I did. I didn't realize this movie was the purest distillation of your heart song.
I just really that's how, I just love the message of that scene where she's like, don't you realize you're in a Disney movie? That's what you're doing right now. You guys should get together. And Tiana's like, if I take out a bridge loan, I heard Bank of America has good interest. You know what I mean? Like, but
I also, sure. I just don't think, look, I think they avoided it because it felt like, cliche wrote to do all the story building blocks. And also they want to not shame her for being an independent, strong-minded, business-oriented woman. But I think that's part of the conundrum this movie gets itself into, where it's like they want to be supportive of her dreams and her progress and the way she's built her life at the beginning. But then they're also trying to argue that there's something lacking from her life.
Yeah, you don't need a man, but you need a man, girl. Like, it's
right, because there's no moment in the first 30 minutes where you get the cliched, like, she goes home and then she's just lonely eating a can of soup, above a
dinner alone. Right, exactly.
Right. There's no scene of her rejecting a bunch of boys who like her a lot, It's just like, I don't know, she seems pretty okay. She's pretty good.
This is the whole problem. This is the needle they can't thread, where they're like, well, what, can we do a romance without it feeling didactic? And it feels like they're like, I guess not. Let's not do it. And I love Moana, and we're going to talk about Moana. But I do think Moana slightly struggles from her being a little too together when the movie starts. Like, and that's sort of my problem with the 2010s Disney thing. These characters are two together.
We'll get to it. I mean, I have my whole Moana take on that, but we'll get to it. Yes.
Fair enough. But I
Sure.
mean, like, Frozen, is the one that figures that out the best. My problem with Frozen is how it looks. I just don't love how it looks. Like, I don't mind the whole sort of narrative arc of Elsa. Like, I dig that by and large.
The Tangled Frozen thing I like is I feel like they have figured out how to replicate the Disney art style in 3 dimensions. Even if you prefer it hand drawn, it's got the right shapes, it's got the right stylings, it's got the right lines, it's got the right movements.
Tangled is better to me because I like the colors more. In Frozen, they're so, like, if I drop them, they just shatter is how it always feels. They just
Too
they're
delicate.
so pale, and doll-like. Yeah.
Well, that's the problem. When they're in 3 dimensions, they all look like really bespoke porcelain dolls. You become very aware of the physics of that head is huge and that waist is tiny, and those wrists are like toothpicks. The thing I was going to say, I think Tangled is the one that solves that problem the best. I think I agree that the romance is not my favorite aspect of it, but I think it does it well enough, at least goes through the basic motions. But I also think Tangled has the right balance of kind of, she thinks she's an independent, strong-minded woman who knows what to do, but also she's lived in a tower her entire life. She doesn't understand how anything works. So I feel like the movie lets her feel confident about herself while also creating comedy out of the fact that her misunderstanding of the world around her is sometimes that she thinks things are more dangerous than they are, and sometimes she doesn't recognize the danger, and there's a lot of versatility in how she can behave. This movie just, as you said, backs itself into a corner where they don't want to shame anything about Tiana's life before she turns into a frog. And then once she's a frog, they have to argue suddenly that she was missing something earlier.
It's the Moana problem that I just mentioned. It's the same thing where they're just like, they build her up so much, which is good in that she's this pretty lovable and interesting and put together character from minute 1.
Mhm.
But then it's like, right, well, then what do we do with this? Like, we're not going to do a movie about someone opening a business. Like, come on, right. They, like you said, they back themselves into a corner.
Remind me, we'll come back to that at the end of the episode. Let's talk about some of the supporting characters. Let's talk about Lewis and Ray and Facilier, because they're the color in this movie.
I love all of these characters so much. I love them so much.
I watch their songs a lot, like on YouTube or whatever. Like I go to their song.
It is funny that Ray probably sings more in this movie than Tiana does.
Yeah, there was a point where I don't think I realized this on my first watch, but there was a point this time where I was like, Ray singing again?
Again?
Couldn't believe
It's another Ray solo?
He's got a good arc.
We had a minute has passed and he's singing again. Okay.
Ray's got 2 I Want songs?
Ben, wait, you haven't really weighed in, Ben. What's your take on Princess and the Frog Toad? Ray is the character that feels very Ben friendly.
Off mic, you've been hyping Ray up to Ben for the last 2 months. Saying, Ben, you're going to like this guy.
And I did. I loved Ray.
Yeah. He's cool.
I think Ray is like my kind of guy. He stuck out, but I just watched this movie for the first time. And it just was like, what is happening?
Sure, right. She's a frog
in a lot of
right?
different ways. Just like, this is wild.
A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. Just like alligator that plays trumpet, but that talks to humans.
My favorite character.
Does. Yeah, good character.
All about him.
He's a great character. It's so like, but then the payoff. Imagine going to a restaurant and an alligator is playing trumpet while you're eating dinner.
You'd be like, only in New Orleans, baby.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Oh my God. See, like little things like that are really cool. But overall, I was very perplexed by it.
I think Louis is so funny. I think, why am I forgetting his name now? Eric Goldberg, who was the main animator on Genie, is the one who was the main animator on Louis. And he's got all the fun Disney comedy character energy.
The physicality.
Great voice performance. Yeah. And I just love his fucking conflict of just all he wants to do is play jazz for humans. And he's a terrifying Alligator.
I have had this image stuck in my head since the first time I saw this movie, which I think was a few years ago. But when he plays on the boat and then jumps off, and then all of the rifles come out of it. That's so crazy. There's so many rifles.
It's so funny.
I remember being so underwhelmed by this movie in theaters and just exploding when that happened. Like, I was like, I don't remember the last time I laughed that hard at anything. The entire setup and timing of that is so exquisite of just, well, why don't you do it? I tried once, didn't work out well. You're not expecting a cut to, right? That is not in the common vernacular of these movies.
It's so not on Disney where it's like,
Yes.
well, have you ever tried it? And you're like, we're going to move on. I assume we're just about, and he's like, well, and you're like, wait, we're doing a Family Guy style cutaway. And then it works. And then it has, like, it would be funny if he just jumped on the boat, played the trumpet, and then jumped off. Like, that would be funny. It would not be seismic.
Would be hilarious. If it was that same lockdown shot, everyone's playing on the boat, he climbs over the side looking sneakily, proudly starts playing the trumpet, everyone looks at him aghast. That would be funny, right? It's the timing, it's the rhythm of it, yeah.
It's the timing. It's the fact that he's like, I know they won't like that I'm a crocodile, but surely once I start playing this trumpet,
he thinks he can win them over. And the fact that they don't immediately like run off in revulsion, that they're just stunned, silent, watching him. But then once he jumps back into the water and the guns come out, it becomes...
Hold on. Wouldn't you, Griffin?
Yes.
Wouldn't you be astounded?
Yes.
You'd stop for 1 minute at least.
Yes, I would. I'm not questioning it. I'm saying it's funny and good. I like it.
Yeah.
But everyone on the boat had a rifle.
Yes.
And people on other levels had, like, he wasn't even on those other levels. Why did someone on every level come out and try to shoot this?
They're ringing the croc bell. Everyone, please get your croc guns out.
Just the deeper thing of like where it's like he's a crocodile who loves jazz, and they're like, well, how do you know about jazz? Like, and he's like, well, the riverboats. He's an alligator. I'm sorry, I always confuse. But the riverboats are always going by, and all the legends have played on that. And I hear that, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I love that. That's
cool.
great. That makes total sense.
I love that his conflict is so specifically, I want to be able to play for humans. Like these creatures in the swamp don't appreciate my music. I know that's the audience that would get my skill, and they are scared for their life when they see me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to disrupt the flow of conversation here. David, Ben, James, I'm going to kindly request that you all shut up right now. I need complete silence for the thought I'm about to share in real time. I'm saying this in real time, but I just demand that none of you butt in for the next 2-3 minutes. We deserve to know what we're putting in our bodies and why, especially when it comes to something we take every day. Ritual's clean, vegan, friendly, multivitamin is formulated with high quality nutrients in bioavailable forms your body can actually use. What won't you find in these bioavailable forms? Won't find sugars, won't find GMOs, won't find major allergens, synthetic fillers, artificial colorants, all the things that are part of almost everything else in my diet. I would say those are kind of the key ingredients in everything else I eat on a daily basis. Plus, the fresh taste and delayed release capsule design makes taking your vitamins easy. I'll say this, can't speak for others. I don't go outside a lot these days. Haven't had a lot of sunlight in the last year. Not a ton of exercise, fresh air. Don't eat particularly well. I use junk food for just a momentary endorphin pop, which makes it all the more important that I try to put some good stuff in my system to counterbalance the probably, let's be honest, long-lasting damage I've caused myself in the last year. So that's what I like about Ritual, why I take them, and why they make me feel better. You know, I just would say that's sort of my personal experience with Ritual in a sort of conversational, light and fun tone. But here's what I'll say next to all of you. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Ritual is the multivitamin reimagined. Because, and I don't mean to get too political here, a multivitamin should contain key nutrients and forms your body can actually use to help fill gaps in the diet. No shady extras. And I'm not talking about background actors who are gambling on set. I'm talking about shady extra ingredients in a pill, okay? Ritual's delayed release capsule design delivers high quality nutrients, including vitamin D3. That's one of the big ones. In just 2 daily pills. And Ritual is made traceable. You'll always know what nutrients you're taking, where they come from, thanks to Ritual's one-of-a-kind, visible supply chain. I'm sorry, that's the political talk out of the way, and if you disagree with me, prove me wrong, debate me in the marketplace of ideas, you cowards. Listen, I want all of you to get key nutrients. It actually means a lot to me. And I'm saying all of you, but in fact, the person I'm really talking to is just you. The one person listening to this right now. If you're listening to the podcast right now, I want you to know you're the person I'm directing this towards. And I'm not saying your name because I don't want to blow up your spot, but you know. If you want to get key nutrients without the BS bullshit. I usually try to not curse in these ad reads, but I feel like they served me up there. Ritual is offering listeners a blank check, 10% off during your first 3 months. Here's all you got to do. Visit ritual.com, okay? But you type in /blank check at the end of that URL before you hit go. That's ritual.com /blank check to start a new ritual today. And it's a ritual of taking rituals.
Now, let's move from Lewis
Mhm.
to Ray, who is a middle-aged Cajun firefly who's friends with Mama Odie. That's how he comes in. Okay, sure.
Yeah, let me just say, I mean, you, David, saying that like Mama Odie represents your outlook on life, which is you just need to calm down and find someone to kiss. Ray represents Ben's outlook on life, was wouldn't it be cool if you wanted to fuck the moon?
That's just what I'm saying, where he's like, my thing is that I'm in love with the evening star in the sky. And it's like, oh, he thinks it's a firefly. I get it. This won't come up again. And they're like, no, that's going to be the emotional button of the movie.
Come on. When he dies and his and his essence becomes another star, it's amazing. It's fantastic.
It's fucking great.
I had totally forgotten that happened. I forgot that he actually dies and that they prove him correct, that he gets to be with his love in the night sky forever.
You assume because he sort of dies out, because when Facilier steps on him, you don't see it happen, that he won't be dead.
They'll
like,
Tinkerbell
we'll
clap, he'll come back to life, right?
It's really upsetting that it happens, and it happens in that way, because to be stepped on is so graphic. Like, we see him get stepped on.
Real bad. And this is a movie where several frogs have gotten like smacked with books and then popped back up. Wile E. Coyote style.
When a bug gets stepped on, it's over. It's over.
The way he just sort of does it casually, and then he's just sort of like, okay, and then moves on as well. It's so cruel. I love it.
I mean,
and then, go ahead.
No, what were you going to say, David? Sorry.
Well, I was going to move on to Facilier. So, no, if you have more Ray talk, let's talk Ray. He's voiced by Jim Cummings.
Jim Cummings, who's Winnie the Pooh, is 1,000, Darkwing Duck, a million billion different characters.
He's Ed.
In the Hyenas,
The Lion King.
Right.
Yeah, he's like, he's often your funny guy, I feel like, right? Like,
yes.
he can give you weird noises.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, Dr. Facilier, the Shadow Man.
I mean, just from an acting standpoint, Keith David's the MVP of this movie, right?
Yeah. So dialed in. Such a good singer.
The character is frightening.
Yeah.
Also, like, is just all Keith David has to do is just like, and you're like, oh my God, I'm terrified.
Everything about this character visually, every time he's on screen, is just, this is the argument for 2D animation, right? Like, the character just feels like an argument for this medium being worthwhile.
His shadow, his own shadow, like the back and forth that he has with his own shadow, and then the other shadow creatures it's terrifying to me. And when he gets dragged when he gets dragged to wherever he's going.
To whatever, voodoo hell, whatever. Yeah, he's gonna get turned into a statue.
It's terrifying. I can't imagine being a child and seeing that. It's and his face in the tombstone at the woo. Come on.
The conception of this character is so bizarre because it's like voodoo street magician who wants to own the city.
Sure.
He is haunted by a bunch of masks who function as like the backup vocalist for Cab Calloway.
Right.
And he's constantly trying to stay ahead of his debts, like he's a gambling addict and they're constantly trying to collect on him.
Yes.
But he just sort of like, he kind of like coincidentally stumbles into the plot. I mean, like in the opening number, you just see him like playing like 3-card Monty with people and shit.
Yeah.
And then
he
it's
gives someone a hair cream and they like turn into a werewolf. I like that. That's really funny.
right. But then it's just kind of like, he's just this guy who exists in the tapestry of this city looking for a way to run everything.
Yes, he's basically like he's gotten these magic powers, but the price is that he needs to like pay these people in whatever dark, magic tricks and things like like
Yeah.
cursing people essentially.
Yeah, he has to hand over. Oh, that was another very frightening image when he's like, "I'm gonna have the city in the palm of my hand, and you'll have as many souls as you want." And then we see the masks suck the souls out of the fictional people of New Orleans that he has in his hands, but we see them pulled out of people. It's so scary. I can't imagine seeing that as a kid. I probably would have fast forwarded through it every time.
I just feel like it's interesting that so often the Disney villains, especially in these movies we've been watching, they're very close to the main characters, right? It's like, this is your guardian, this is your parent, this is your boss,
Yeah, this vagrant, essentially. This like fully not connected at all. Like, just like, I'm here too.
Right. Naveen is just dumb enough to walk through his like curtain, but it could have been any mark.
Yeah, he needs money, right? Yeah.
And then Naveen happens to sort of stumble upon Tiana. I mean, there's like an interesting amount of coincidence in this movie versus the usual Disney princess movies, which are so like, it is destined, it is in the tapestry.
Sure, right.
I ran this by you, David, but my brother, James Newman, past and future guest, huge fan of Keith David. We talk about Keith David a lot. We have a group text thread with his friend Gabe, who I think listens to the show, where we often will talk about if we've rewatched a good Keith David performance or seen one for the first time. But just like, that guy never gets enough credit. Let's have this 3-person text thread be a safe space to discuss Keith David at any moment. And I think Gabe at one point threw out, what is the best Keith David movie? And I had extended this to you, Dave, and I said, it's an interesting question because you have to go, what is the best film that Keith David is in?
Right. In which case you're thinking The Thing, right? You're thinking that kind of thing, right? He's been in some very masterpieces.
Right. Like The Thing might be the best movie he's in, right? But you're like, or is it what movie uses Keith David the best?
And this is top. This is high on the list, right?
Right. Like, I don't love this movie, but you kind of have to, like, it's kind of inarguable this is a top 3 Keith David movie from that prism, and that it almost feels like this movie is a tribute to, like, Keith David.
Isn't this guy great?
Yeah, this guy's unbelievable.
Don't we love Keith David?
Yeah.
Like he finally gets a run.
I find that really hard to even try to answer, like even attempt to answer.
It is a fascinatingly difficult question.
And you forget that, like, oh, right, he's in Requiem for a Dream, right? Like, there's so many movies he's in where you're like, oh, I completely forgot he has like 10 minutes in that one.
And then even if you're thinking about like utilizing him versus how good is the movie, but like he's such a good villain, and but then he's also such a good, like, warm, lovable character. Like he plays so he can play both sides, and you're just like, I don't know what even is the best energy I like from Keith David. Like, you don't know which one of those you want more than the other.
That's what makes it so tough. I mean, I was saying to David, there's almost an argument I want to form that the best Keith David movie is Something About Mary, just because that is a performance that is just Keith David. Like he gets
Yeah.
to own about a 10-minute stretch of that movie where you just feel like none of that was on paper. And he's just giving you everything.
He's so funny in that movie.
He's just so funny.
kind of very crucial to the movie's obviously crucial early scene, right? You know, like the line deliveries are very crucial. I mean, that in that year he has that and Armageddon.
Yeah.
Two huge hits where he has like 10 minutes in each.
I mean, I would argue that the best Keith David movie is the one you're watching right now. Like whichever one you're like, that's the best one. Like,
And you probably are watching a movie that he's in. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very possible, or a TV show.
That's a great point, and that's why this group text exists. Because anytime we watch a Keith David movie, one of us wants to text the other two and go like, "Is this the best one?" I'm just looking at his Wikipedia right now. First of all, he says that his 3 favorite voice performances of all time are Spawn, Goliath, and Dr. Facilier. Which even just thinking about that, you're like, right? He was HBO's
He was
Spawn.
the voice of Spawn, right? Yeah, in the HBO show.
He was Goliath on Gargoyles, and then he's like the best modern Disney villain. But then you also look at like other voiceover roles, and you're like, right, he's the narrator in the English version of Princess Mononoke. He has vaguely anonymous roles like Frollo's soldiers and Hunchback of Notre Dame, Apollo the Sun God and Hercules. Like he's got a lot of the small ones. But then he's in Coraline.
wait, oh yes,
He's the cat in Coraline.
Yeah, it's great in Coraline. He's the cat. Yeah,
Yes.
he's so cool.
oh my gosh, that when that cat starts talking, you're like, oh my, like,
Yeah.
I want the movie to be this for the rest of the time. Like,
Yes.
I just want to hear this cat talk.
He's the narrator of like Ken Burns's jazz.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he can give you, obviously his 1 season turn on Community is fantastic.
Unbelievable.
I love Elroy Patashnik.
Every time he pops up on Rick and Morty, I'm like, can I?
Yes.
I just want to hear him some.
I love how much they use him and the president, all that shit. But then I'm just looking at other shit here, and it's like, right, he was Black Panther on the Fantastic Four cartoon. I mean, and this is just us talking about the voiceover work, right?
I mean, from what we know, right, Griff, he's one of those guys where like if you've got a role for him, he'll do it. Like he's a hard worker.
Yes.
He's not hard to get. He makes like 10 movies a year.
Yes.
Right. Like, you know, he'll show up in a big movie. He'll show up in a straight to video Behind Enemy Lines sequel. Like he'll do it all.
I believe I've read interviews with him where he's said as much of just like, I consider myself very lucky to be able to work, and I don't take that lightly. And he's also a guy who just has the craft and the discipline enough that he truly is never bad. Why should he turn down a role? He will always be the best thing in whatever he's in. It will never diminish his reputation to be in a movie. He only makes himself look better by going, how was Keith David so good in this? I just want to say, I'm looking at his live action Wikipedia now.
He also has to be he has like 10 Broadway credits. He is a Tony nominee. Like, you know, he's obviously he's won Emmys.
He's done everything, and he's done everything equally well. I just want to say, I'm looking at his live action filmography. His first film credit is Disco Godfather Club Patron uncredited, right?
Hell yeah.
So that doesn't really
Sounds pretty
count.
good.
That doesn't, but like that doesn't really count, right? That sounds like it's an extra. What do you think his first proper film role is?
I unfortunately know because I was looking to. It's The Thing. That's his first movie role.
It's The Thing. The Thing is his first movie. Then
Whoa.
And he's very good in it.
his second movie is
Yeah.
Platoon.
Yeah, he's good in that too.
Right. And then you're just like, okay, within that first decade, he does Bird, he does They Live, he does Roadhouse, he does Always, he does Two Carpenters and Eastwood as Spielberg.
It's true.
God, he's
Yeah.
the fucking best.
He does. He works with Spike Lee. He did Clockers. He works with Sam Raimi. He did The Quick and the Dead. Like, I mean, he's got an incredible voice. As of course, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I keep replaying I did a training lab at the Public Theater in New York right after school, and right after college, I should say, so that people know what I'm talking about. But I played Othello in one of my scenes, and I replay this in my head often, which was the director was just like, Keith David played Othello on this stage, so you gotta bring it. And I think about that every time I do anything. I go, yep, Keith David played Othello on that stage once. Like I could be in LA shooting something, and it'll be like, yep, but remember that Keith David played Othello
You know what's incredible about that, James? It's not like you got to see that performance. Someone just told you, Keith David, he played Othello, and you in your head went, well, that must have been one of the great performances in history.
Exactly.
You just have no doubt in your mind that must have been historic work.
It's true, and it must be true. There's
It must be
videos
true.
probably somewhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
God, I'm just more things I just forget. Right, he's the villain in Barbershop. He's 5 roles in Cloud Atlas. It's so deep. Yeah, I mean, I do. It's just so much fun to watch this character move on screen, and it is so much fun to hear him say or sing anything.
And you don't want him to be sucked to voodoo hell. You're like, oh shit. Even though he's been doing all of this stuff, we haven't seen him. He hasn't killed anybody. He hasn't. Oh wait, no, he stepped on Ray. He stepped on Ray.
He stepped on Ray.
He did step on Ray. That's the most egregious thing he did. And honestly, I loved Ray.
Yeah.
But when he's like, oh no, I have other plans. I have other plans. Please, no. You're like, no, don't suck him into hell.
That having been said, he also is one of the most purely villainous Disney characters in that there's no tragic backstory. There's no redeeming. He's just a guy who enters, is scary, is in league with demons, and cons people. And you're still like, I feel bad for this guy. We should give him another chance. That's Keith David. That's all Keith David, though. Keith David is just everything he says is simultaneously kind of scary, kind of funny, kind of sexy.
It is all 3 of those things.
At all times.
I want to say that Bruce Smith, who co-directed Space Jam, is his animator, and said basically my favorite Disney villains are Captain Hook and Cruella de Vil, and that is what I wanted him to be. I wanted him to have the physicality of a Cruella de Vil, right? This sort of long, exiguous, crazy stick-like sort of herky-jerky figure. But then I guess the sort of panache of a Captain Hook is sort of right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were talking about that on one of our earlier episodes, how it feels like Captain Hook and Ursula were the first 2 Disney villains that enjoyed being villains, that were having fun.
Captain Hook is cool. He's got a hook for a hand. Did you know that?
You fully respect them. You fully respect them for having such a good time being like, I'm gonna kill this kid. He's like, Captain Hook's like, I'm gonna kill this child, and you're like, fuck yeah, Captain Hook.
Not only that, you're like, maybe I should kill a child. It seems like it's working for this guy.
Jesus, it's true. He's cool. That's so. All this stuff that we're talking about, all this side stuff, I just love it. It's part of why I always enjoy this movie. Anytime I've thrown it on, is the middle section. I think everything you guys are saying about the Naveen Tiana romance, totally fair. As much as I like people kissing. But it's powered along by all this other stuff, which is lots of Disney movies do that. Obviously, they have the side characters, give you a lot of the energy. But I love it.
I guess it just exclusively becomes about the side characters and the villains at this point.
Pretty cool.
As long as they're frogs, I kind of just stop giving a shit about the 2 of them until that's resolved.
They really do hand the movie over to them, and it feels like it's theirs. And it's, I mean, it's sad.
I also agree with you, James, that I think in particular, Tiana's frog design is pretty uninspired and unexpressive. The Naveen frog at least has a little more fun where it's like, oh, is this Pepe Le Pew frog and whatever.
Yeah.
I like when he has the little banjo and he's playing it, the little log banjo.
Yes, the log with spider web on it, right? Is that what the...
Yep.
The Tiana frog just looks like they put eyelashes and hips on the Naveen frog. It just feels like, well, of course, for the 2 genders, frog and lady frog. We all know that frog is neutral and lady frog is the variation.
Yeah, she's got her hands on her hips a lot, obviously, because she's always frustrated with him because he's such a cad.
With good reason.
Yeah, he's a bit of a cad. Played by Bruno Campos, who is kind of retired now. He stopped right after this movie. He went to law school and now he's an environmental lawyer.
Wow. He was great in this, but I get it.
Yeah, he's Brazilian, but before this, he'd been on Nip Tuck a lot and he'd done, foreign films and, been in sitcoms and stuff. He was on Jessie, if you remember.
He got that Disney money and he was like, I don't need to do anything else. Let me save the world.
Went to Michigan, got a JD.
Disney residuals must be so bananas. I
Yeah,
they
heard
must
a story secondhand from a friend who is friends with someone who had a primary role in a Pixar movie. And I was talking to them about how I've been trying to like focus more on voiceover work. And he was like, that's lucrative, right? And I'm like, no, it's just like it all pays scale, right? If you get one of these big things, I imagine it pays well. It's a lot easier and less time consuming, but everything pretty much pays scale. And he was like, so my friend who was in a Pixar movie, I asked her about it. And she said, and like a big part and a big one, she was like, it was like $60,000, you know, like nothing to sneeze at, but it's like for a movie that big, you're just like, oh, that's, you know, it's what fucking Robin Williams got for Aladdin before all these things got it. But it's like, unless you're a massive movie star and you're the title character, it's pretty much like baseline, you get $60,000.
Sure.
And then he was like, and then a year later, the first residual check paid for her house.
Oh my! Wait, paid for a house?
Yeah, she just bought a house. The next year, the residuals bought a house.
Wow.
Yeah, and like a good house in Hollywood.
This is a major role, I'm assuming.
It's like a
not
major supporting role. But then it was also like, and then you do the things for the theme parks and the video games and the specials and the shorts and whatever. And it's just like, it just never stops. Like the thing you get paid least for is doing the movie itself the first time. And then it just never ceases to pay out for you.
Well, people do pay for these movies, and Disney remains successful.
Well, this is a thing I want to talk about. David, you were saying the Moana conundrum of, you know, do we want to just watch the girl be good at everything? Do we want to see Tiana just be good at running a business? It was recently announced at Disney Investor Day that they are doing a Tiana TV show for Disney Plus that is going to be 2D, and it is pointedly
Love that.
going to be 2D by Walt Disney Feature Animation. It is not done by the television department. It seems like they are giving them a show in order to keep 2D animators on payroll, giving them something to do. So it's going to be high quality. I think this is coinciding with Splash Mountain is now going to be a Tiana ride. Disney looked at the clock and went, 2020 now feels like the moment to begin considering that maybe one of our biggest rides shouldn't be themed around Song of the South. So they announced that Splash Mountain is going to be redone to be all Tiana themed. And I think they're probably dovetailing those two things together. It seems like Disney is trying to use Tiana as a human who is now a princess and a business owner as more of a character to make more stories in that timeline and not just be stuck with Frog Tiana.
We should acknowledge that in the final act of this movie, of course, Naveen tries to get kissed by what's her pants, the John Goodman's daughter.
Lottie.
Doesn't get it done in time.
It's also a pretty sweaty. Oh, she will technically be a princess for 3 hours because her father is king of Mardi Gras. Okay.
No, it's cool. It's cool. He's the king of Mardi Gras.
Okay.
Just like if you're the mattress king, right? Or you're like, right, the real estate king.
But then does that make your daughter the mattress princess? That's my
Sure.
question. Okay.
Why not? Yes. But it doesn't work because Mardi Gras ends. And so they decide to just be frogs together. And then, of course, they are legally wed as frogs. And in that makes Tiana a princess because he is a prince. And so when they kiss, they are humans again. That's how they close that circle.
And I'll say when that happens, I go, yeah, duh, guys, you should have realized that a long time ago. You're a prince.
They sang the whole song. They sang the whole song.
Yeah.
They didn't get it.
Maybe they were worried that like a swamp frog wedding might not be legally binding in the eyes of magic. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know.
Did you notice though that the magic was slimy when they transformed?
Very slimy. Yes.
I like that.
Oh, at the end when they reverted back?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
They got some mucus magic.
We love it.
I am just like, I don't know what this Tiana show is going to be, but I would be very excited if it was just like Tiana and her animal friends run a cafe. I would love for it to be that.
Yeah, like Louis plays the trumpet there.
I mean, that's a great start right there.
Right, I'm just like, make it Cheers in the 1920s in New Orleans, and Louis is like coach, but he also plays music.
I mean, I don't not like that.
I would love that. Like, it's called Tiana's Place, and like, you know, everyone shows up. They're the regular people that go there every day. There has to be though, like a voodoo, like a protege of Facilier who is like, who's going after them, or I won't watch the show.
Yeah, Keith David needs to be involved, please.
But yeah, all that's known is it's called Tiana.
Oh, it's just called Tiana. They shouldn't have done that. That's wrong.
It's just called Tiana, which in and of itself is like encouraging.
No, it should have been called Tiana's Place.
Well, I'm saying we're halfway there. We're almost there.
What if it was called like the further adventures of Tiana and she's definitely a frog? Like, what if they like made it?
Yeah. No, I'm hoping they'll evolve the title to Tiana's Place.
Yeah, because it feels like if it's something called Tiana, I would feel like there'd be like, we found a reason to make her a frog again. You know what I mean? Like, it begs to do that again. You know, I hate when TV shows about a movie do that, where they're like, that thing that you really don't like about the movie, we're gonna make that the whole thing.
We're gonna undo whatever exciting, cathartic victory happened at the end of the movie. Yeah, I'm interested to see what that show is. But it is interesting. I feel like this movie comes out, they were pinning a lot on it. They were banging the drum really hard of like, this is important. We have to regain the Disney musical. It underperforms. And then Tangled is so big the next year, you know, then the next run of them are all just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, that it's just like, well, I guess no looking back now. It feels like, I don't know. I worked at the Disney store a couple years after this movie came out, and Tiana merch was always really, really big. It did always feel like there was a lot of love for this character, even if the movie never got elevated to that classic status.
I think this movie has a big cultural footprint. I know a lot of like, you know, young kids like it. Like I feel it does feel like it has lingered. I mean, for them to, it's not just, you know, like for them to do the Splash Mountain thing, right, and to announce the TV show, like you say, like obviously they must have noticed.
It
right.
feels like they're noticing that there's love for this movie a decade plus later. I'm interested to see what they do with the character and the world now. Because there are elements I like, yeah.
They also made a huge mistake, which was that they released this film in mid-December.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they did that. Like, obviously, they put it out limited, like Thanksgiving weekend, but like its wide release is December 11th. This is a summer movie, I think. Yeah. Like, sure, Disney Christmas, it's family time, but like nothing about this movie is Christmassy.
No.
And also, that's just such a busy time. Like, you know, like it's a little tougher to nose in there.
I think it's weirdly like it's too light. It's too much of a romp to play as a holiday movie. You know, where I think if a Disney musical is going to come out in the holidays, it usually has a little more weight to it. And even just like Tangled and Frozen feel more epic and have more adventure and action and shit, you know?
When did Frozen come out? Frozen was a Thanksgiving movie, right?
Frozen, Tangled both come out in November. Yeah. Now they pretty much stick with the Thanksgiving. Moana, Frozen, Tangled, both Ralph movies are Thanksgiving. Zootopia is like the one that came out in the spring.
Huge hit.
I mean, all of them have been hits.
Yes. Okay. We're gonna play the box office game. We're doing the wide release, right, Griffin? That's what you want.
Yeah, right. Because they tried to repeat that thing too, where they like released it in one theater in LA, one theater in New York, and then it didn't even really blow the doors off there.
Oh, I would say that it did. I mean, a $400,000 per screen average is pretty good, right? Yeah.
I stand corrected. I misremembered.
It did good. But I do think that whole strategy is a mistake these days.
But I know in New York they played it at like the Ziegfeld, and they had some pre-show thing and like a program, and the tickets cost more, and they were really trying to make it into like a roadshow style event thing for that 1 week to hope that it would build word of mouth as like this is important. Yeah, am I correct in remembering it like just made 100?
It made domestically it made 104, made 270 worldwide. Tangled, like you said, makes 200 and like 580 worldwide. Like Tangled's just a big level up, and it's partly the 3D thing, I think. There's other things too, but like I do think that it's just like, no, 3D movies are now what children's animated movies look like. Get used to it.
Yeah, and one could argue this had not laid dormant long enough for there to be quite the sense of longing that was needed. I think Tangled also, like, even though it's a different visual style, I think Tangled benefited from the same, it's been a while since there was a princess musical.
Right. I guess that's part of it. I also think like the reason I didn't see this movie in theaters is that she turns into a frog. And I saw the trailer and I was like, that seems stupid. Like, what? Why is she a frog? Like, I was just kind of like, I'll catch this later. And then I caught it later and I was like, a firefly turns into a star. It's about kissing. This is good.
All the Disney corporate people also like talk about this as like one of their Waterloos, where they're just like, we really had faith in if we sell the Disney magic, we need to be a princess. It needs to be traditional. It needs to be classical. People will want it. And they said, like, by the time it came out, the perception was this is old fashioned and only for little girls. Like, this is for 5-year-olds. This is a baby movie. Like, it very much read juvenile and read kind of stodgy.
It's why I think it will happen at some point. There will be some moment where whatever the cultural temperature is right. And this probably wasn't it. Yeah.
I think when people saw Tangled and Frozen, which they marketed deceptively, but it worked in terms of getting people to the theaters, I would hear people say, oh, I didn't realize how much I missed those movies. Okay. So does this movie open at number 1?
Well, in its wide release, yes. It gets to number 1. It's a $24 million. It's not a huge opening, but solid.
And the next weekend Avatar comes out, right?
See, that's another fucking problem. You're right. Yes, the next weekend Avatar comes out.
Yeah, I think it's literally the week before the biggest movie.
Oh, come on. There's too much. There's too much stacked against this.
It was just, they fucked up everything.
Number 2, though, Griffin, is one of the major phenomenons of the year. It's dropped 25%. In its 4th week, it's still number 2, dropping really low every single time. It was number 1 the week before.
Is it what I consider the most inexplicable blockbuster of the 2010s?
Sure, I don't know.
The Blind Side?
It's The Blind Side, yeah.
How the fuck did that happen? I still don't get it.
It's like American Sniper. It was like a Heartland movie. It was a movie where it's like, this is a great inspirational true story. We're taking the whole family. Like, you know what I mean? Like, even more so because American Sniper was, intense. Yeah. So that had that. But The Blind Side is just like, this is a movie for the whole family. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll check your blind side, like it, right? Like,
I cannot.
I once again, David, it's not that I don't understand that they were successful. The numbers on those 2 movies are so outsized. They're bizarre. Crazy. It's bizarre that it's just like, why these ones to some degree? And like, what, Blindside was $250 domestic?
Yeah, there was the Bullock thing, I guess, like, oh, it's a comeback for her.
Proposal had come out that same year, right?
Yeah, and like she wins the Oscar, obviously. But yeah, not a good movie. I did see it. Not very good. Just like really treacly.
But as you said, it like opened big, like the same weekend as Twilight. And they were like, wow, that's a big number 2 for Blindside. And then Twilight started dropping and Blindside started growing. And then it was number 1, like in its 3rd or 4th week. And it's still holding on.
Yep.
Just so bizarre, that movie.
Number 3, another inspirational sports true story drama. New this week.
From 2009. And it's not a live action Disney, right?
No, it's not. It's an Oscar nominated film from a major auteur who we will cover one day, maybe, I guess, even though he's made like a million movies.
Is it based on a true story, a true athlete?
Yes, true story. A major historical figure of our lifetime. But it's a sports movie.
Yeah, it's a sports movie with a major historical figure of our lifetime.
Certainly.
That's an interesting distinction.
I mean, I just mean like this is the movie where it's like, oh my God, this big actor is playing this insanely famous, consequential person. But also it's a sports movie.
The sports thing is almost kind of secondary. You think of the person as a figure first, kind of?
He's a political figure of major importance. It's just that, like,
Do you know what this is? I'm just like, this isn't Ali. What is this?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I try to think of other athletes who had like major political importance.
And he's not an athlete. But the movie is a sports movie.
Oh, motherfucker. It's Invictus?
Invictus. Morgan Freeman as Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Basically the first major Nelson Mandela movie, because the Idris Elba one comes later, right? Long Walk to Freedom.
Yeah.
like, and like Morgan Freeman, I feel like had been circling a Nelson Mandela movie for so long. And then it's like, we're doing it. Clint Eastwood is directing it. And it's specifically about the 1994 Rugby World Cup. That's what it's about. It's about that. Like that year, him getting this like team like to win a big trophy, this team of like white players. Like that's the narrative they finally settled on.
It is one of those movies that I feel like in like January or February of any year, there's a movie that entertainment writers already resent where you're like, this is just going to win every fucking Oscar. And that film always somehow comes up short. Like it's like The Cinderella Man.
Yes, The Good Shepherd.
Charlie Wilson's War, Good Shepherd kind of syndrome where you're like, these people making this movie on this subject? And I just remember my dad watching some ESPN like 30 for 30 about the real story. And he was just like, that's going to win Best Picture so fucking hard. You're telling me Morgan Freeman is playing Nelson Mandela? They're going to give him all 4 acting categories this year.
He just won an Oscar was part of the problem for a Clint Eastwood movie.
But also the whole movie's just kind of a little limp. It's just sort of there.
It's a little limp. Yeah, I only saw it once. Have you seen it, James? I mean, it's okay.
I have not seen it.
It's such a shrug of a movie.
No.
Such a shrug of a movie.
All right, number 4, Griffin, as you mentioned, it's a major franchise entry.
It's Twilight, but it's the second one. It's New Moon.
Directed by friend of the show, Chris Weitz. New Moon. A colossal hit.
Humongous.
$300 million.
I mean, as I've said before on the show, I went to see New Moon at midnight, and when the Summit Entertainment logo came up, it got more applause than I will ever earn for anything in my entire life. It was a sobering moment. It was, you have to limit your expectations for your career. You will never create that much excitement in anyone.
And number 5 is a movie that we just discussed on this podcast. Another Disney film. More suited to the holiday than Princess and the Frog.
Ooh, we just discussed it on this podcast. We didn't do an episode about it, did we?
We did in our past miniseries.
Oh, it's fucking A Christmas Carol.
It's A Christmas Carol.
I mean, truly the most boring film ever made.
Jim Carrey, you're very dull.
I never saw it.
It's not good.
Yeah. I mean, James, I'll put it this way. I've watched it and I haven't seen it.
That's how I feel about The Blind Side. I've watched it, but I haven't seen it.
It's impossible to have seen that movie. You can watch it. You can be in the act of watching it currently. You cannot have watched it.
Some other movies in the top 10. Brothers. Remember Brothers? Tobey Maguire, Jake Gyllenhaal. Brothers. What if they were brothers?
That's another one, though, where it's like, isn't it a remake of a Suzanne Bier movie? And it's Jim Sheridan and Natalie Portman. It was just like, oh, Oscar.
Big one.
Yeah.
Too dark, I think, because it's an Iraq war drama. You know, that sort of long legacy of Iraq war dramas not connecting with audiences until American Sniper. Old Dogs, Griffin, is in the top 10.
Yes. I mean, the most demented film ever made.
You've got 2012. Roland Emmerich's 2012.
A movie I love.
You love 2012?
Yeah, you always give me shit for this.
Yeah, when the dude throws his child up and then falls into the chasm. Oh man, come on, that's it's beautiful.
Exactly, James. It is precisely my flavor of nonsense. It is the exact kind of ugly bullshit nonsense that I fall for.
Well, we hated that guy. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We were like, this guy's such an asshole. You know, but then he died saving his child. And so then it was like, was he, because that was what was driving him, was his kids the whole time.
Yes, absolutely. Also, that movie has an original song sung by Adam Lambert called Time for Miracles that feels like one of the more recent examples of someone trying to do I don't want to miss a thing. And I just love the music video of Adam Lambert, fully Adam Lamberted, singing like this love theme from 2012, intercut with footage of like buildings falling into the center of the earth. It's a thing we stopped getting outside of the 90s. And that alone makes me love the movie so much.
The only other one I want to shout out is Nimrod Antal's Armored, which is like a pretty good B movie. Like,
yeah,
that guy is a good B movie director. And that's his best work.
He was sort of supposed to be the next guy. I feel like he was being pegged as like, this is a cool, like genre scrappy guy who's going to move up and be like Jamie Colette Sarah. And then it sort of never really happened.
it didn't happen because his Predators movie, which is pretty fun, doesn't make enough money or whatever. Like, and that kind of dooms him. But that movie, you know, Matt Dillon, Lawrence Fishburne, Jean Reno, you know, they're robbing an armored truck. It's good shit.
Yeah, geez, right. He does Vacancy, Armored, Predators. He does Controlled, which was Hungarian. But those 3 American movies, which people like. Then he does the Metallica half concert documentary, half fiction film. And then he's made 1 Hungarian film since then. He just like totally...
He's working on Shyamalan's show Servant right now. He's been directing some of that. So I guess maybe he's trying to nudge his way back in. I don't know.
I just definitely felt like he was being primed.
Yeah. Anyway. That's it. Princess and the Frog. It doesn't do that well. Ron Musker, I mean, is it Clements and Musker? They go into retirement, sort of, right?
Right. That's what's so funny is it's like Disney fires them. They go like, I guess we're done. Lasseter pulls them off and goes like, you got to come back. They do this movie. It underperforms. They're like, I guess we're retired.
Well,
and then
I forgot. No, I forgot. They don't retire. They go back to developing an adaptation of Terry Pratchett's novel Mort from the Discworld, which is like their other passion project.
Right, which was never going to get made at Disney, right?
Right, and they can't figure out the rights, and so it never happens, and they're kind of like, well, you know, I guess, you know, whatever. And then Disney's like, you're coming back, baby.
That's what happened. They didn't retire, they left Disney. They got fired from Disney, they left Disney, and now they're retired.
Now they are officially retired. I think I've heard that John Musker, and we can talk about this next week, is currently animating a digital short himself by hand, which sounds like just like a fun old guy project. You know what I mean? Like, so that's cool. But yes, that's what's up with them.
Just everything about these guys who it's very hard to figure out who they are. And I have a friend who recently watched like a video digital Q&A with them. And was like, I watched them speak for like an hour and a half. I don't know who they are. They just seem like nice old guys. But it also is hard to picture them ever being young. They just feel like they fundamentally have always been nice old bald men.
But, you know, it's such a run from them. It's the most definable run in like Disney history in a crazy way.
James, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Guys, thank you.
It had been far too long. We will have you on again much sooner. People should watch Astronomy Club on Netflix. I'm a strong believer in that you should never stop plugging your canceled streaming show.
Yeah, please watch Astronomy Club. Watch season 1. I feel like they need to change you know how they have they'll tell you how many seasons something is?
The drop-down menu.
Yeah, and they need to just be like the show. You know, they need to not say the season number, because then that feels like makes you feel like there's going to be more seasons to it, you know? Because seasons come back. That's the whole thing about a season, is it?
Right. It should say like the complete series or whatever, right? Something very fancy sounding.
It should say a season.
Yes, a season.
Well, that sounds weird, because then it's like you have to go hunt for the other ones. Like, I don't think we got a season.
Yeah, we got a season of this. But it was a great show. Canceled far too soon. Thank you. Yeah. But you're the best, and people should listen to Black Man Can't Jump in Hollywood, obviously.
Please do. Yeah. You know, talking about, we listen to both episodes. Listen to me talk about Princess of the Frog here and then there, and then just see.
And Soul there as well. I'm excited to listen to your guys' Soul episode.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening to this episode. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks to Joe Bone and Pat Reynolds for our artwork. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media. Thank you to our editing team, Alex Barron and AJ McKeon. Thanks to The Great American Novel for our theme song. Go to blankies.reddit.com for some real nerdy shit, and go to our Shopify page for some real nerdy merch. We're still trekking. We're going to keep on trekking through the Kirk and Spock movies over on Patreon. So tune in for that. And I guess our Blanky Awards episode will be coming up right around now, right?
I believe Moana next, and then the Blankies, yes.
Yes. So that's what you have to look forward to. Next week, Moana, closing the book on Musker and Clements. We're going to consider the coconut. And then after that, we're going to consider the best of 2020, a year that is defined by how good it was.
A year to remember. I love reminiscing about 2020. All those movies I watched on my couch.
James,
yeah, what a time.
you just made me realize there's going to be a point where people start saying, is it crazy that I'm like a little bit nostalgic for quarantine?
It's going to happen right away. That's going to happen next week.
It's going to take 2 goddamn days and I'm going to go berserk.
A week into Biden's presidency, and we see how everyone goes crazy. I mean, I actually probably by the time this comes out, it will have very much passed. But but a week into Biden's presidency, everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, remember when whatever crazy thing happens didn't happen anymore?"
I know, right? By the point this episode comes out, people will be writing New York Times op-eds saying, is it just me or do I miss getting offended by things the president tweets every day?
Right, 100%. I miss Trump on Twitter.
Why is this guy so level-headed? I mean,
where's the drama?
I felt a sense of risk every morning when I woke up.
To be clear, I do not feel that way.
I don't feel that way either. Never. Absolutely.
Never.
Fundamentally never. Well, and as always.
That's it.
Yeah, as always, we're just never going to feel that way. I don't even have an additional joke. I just want to reassert we will never feel that way.
Do you have a Cajun in you, Griff?
We're going to find out right now.